Should old acquaintance be forgotten, never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgotten, days of old lang syne?
To you, for many of you, it's your first day back to work after a long weekend off for the New Year's. If this is the first chance you get a chance to listen to us live or even on the podcast, welcome back. It is show number 2 of The George Show on 2023. Lots going on today. This is a big day in terms of politics when you look to the east and under that big white dome that covers up the legislative branch over there at the Capitol. There's going to be a decision made about who's going to be the next Speaker of the House and whether or not it is Kevin McCarthy, and I think it's bound to be Kevin McCarthy. There have been some huge concessions made, some huge issues linger for what the next session is going to hold. We'll talk about that as well. I've reached out to a couple congressional folks with really no hopes that they'd be able to make it because, you know, it's this big vote and the big day and all that other stuff. There was some stuff that took place really unprecedented on Monday Night Football last night. We'll talk about that as well. Point of personal privilege early on, Amanda is airborne right now. I took her to the airport, or at least I couldn't take her because, of course, I was on the radio, but I got to the airport in time to hook up with her, and then I got one of those gate passes, that I'm sure she was thrilled. Because even at 20 years old, her dad is saying to the people that were checking the bags, hey, is there any way dad can go and drop Dot? She's like, oh, of course. That must be something you can do now. Post 9/11, I didn't think they could let anybody through that didn't have a ticket to fly. So I went through the process, got there. We ended up getting something to eat. And I could tell she was a little nervous, because this is a big deal for a 20-year-old anybody. This is the farthest she's been away from home and certainly the longest she's been away from family. The only other time she and I have been separated by not even this great a distance, but certainly over a period of time was when I was in Tikrit, Iraq. But she was back here with mom and the brothers and stuff. So this is a big deal. This is a leadership moment for a burgeoning leader, and so I'm proud of her. Some good stuff that happened was a couple days ago we tried to put her on an earlier flight because we're predicting weather issues. That was more of her mom who had that idea. That was super smart. But the 5 o'clock flight was full. The 4 o'clock flight was full. Her friends got onto the 5 o'clock flight. And so she ended up having to leave yesterday early. Well, it turns out none of those people that flew on the 4 or the 5 o'clock flights made it in time to get on the plane from San Francisco to Singapore. The reason that's a big deal is there isn't another flight from San Francisco to Singapore until Thursday. So I don't know what the airlines do with that, by the way. I don't know if you get a little 3-day vacay there in San Francisco where they pay for you to live at some hotel with bums and drug addicts hanging around, I'm sure the lobby or something, and then you tour on your own with your safety in your own hands, and then they put you back on a plane and fly you there. But they're likely to miss the orientation for this school. And the reason for that is, and I didn't know this, Singapore, which is to our west, turns out to be 15 hours ahead of us. So this flight, which took off late, it didn't take off until about 12:40 our time. And I know that because I woke up, as dads will do, and started texting Amanda to be like, hey, are you on the plane? Did you make it? And I bought her a little pass for the United thing because she had such a huge layover in SFO. And you could tell. I mean, she was excited / a little nervous, a little scared. She got teary saying goodbye to mom, which you get, but not really teary saying goodbye to dad. But I guess that is what it is. And so I watched her go through the door to go out to San Francisco, and I did what dads do. I took a little video of it. I don't know for what purpose, but just so that I could have it, and I sent it around to the family and stuff. But we're texting on the plane. She got stuck in a row that butts up against the bathroom, the latrine, so the chairs don't recline. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a 17-hour flight. 17 hours. I can't imagine. I mean, the longest flight I think I've ever taken is probably from Denver to Munich, because even flying into Iraq, we stopped off in Leipzig, Germany, and it was still only about an 8-hour flight. I mean, 17 hours is incomprehensible to me. I imagine if you go to Australia, it's even longer, but oh my sweet goodness. But here's what's cool. Because of the missed connections and the other stuff, it just so happens
Securities and
that
investment advisory services offered through Woodbury Financial.
It just so happens, buddy, there's something firing. You got to cut off the upline planning, man. You hit that with the button. It just so happens that her entire back row by the bathroom there, nobody showed up for the seats. They were wide open. She got an entire row to herself, and I thought that's a good sign. So I told her to pay for the Wi-Fi so that Dad could continue to text her. Apparently, in Singapore, the texting thing could be $1 trillion. Meanwhile, it's WhatsApp is the way to go. So we've got the WhatsApp thing fired up now. The last time I ever used that was, good Lord, I think when I was in Israel or something like that. But we're going to use that to stay in touch. And hopefully we hear pretty soon here. She doesn't land until 5 o'clock tonight, that she made it safely to Singapore. A couple interesting things that I learned in my time getting her ready to go. They have no Wi-Fi in these. And Singapore's like one of the safest cities in the world. And we'll talk about that in a minute. They have no Wi-Fi in the dorms. You have to like go out and buy some Wi-Fi thing. There's also air conditioning, because apparently right now it's about 81 degrees all the time. They have air conditioning, but you have to buy a card with air conditioning credits. I mean, is that the future for America? Is that the direction we're going? Is that our way forward with the green folks? So she has to go buy a little special card that she puts in to use the air conditioning. What? I mean, that's amazing. The other thing on the prohibited items list in terms of getting into the country. Number 1, controlled substances, drugs, all that stuff. Number 2, wait for it, chewing gum. There's no chewing gum allowed in Singapore, according to the information that Amanda had. That's crazy to me, but now I get it. That does lead to some sense of cleanliness and safety and all that stuff. So that'll be super interesting to hear and get some pictures from her back about the city. Mom, of course, is going to go out there for our kids' spring break because we're going to be in Arizona for baseball. But Dad is going to try to figure out a way to get enough miles together to fly out to Vietnam during her spring break. And I'd love to do the show from there, folks. Again, I'm still waiting to get clearance from the smart people that make more money than I do. But my hope is to be able to go out to Vietnam in a couple months here and go spend spring break with her, because I do not want her to travel in Southeast Asia alone. I'm not looking to be a Netflix docuseries or dramatization of real events involving she went missing in Vietnam. I'm just not interested in that. So I'd like it to be they went missing in Vietnam. So I'd like to be with her if we're going to end up, facing some sort of weirdness. But nonetheless, that was the big deal. That took me till about 12:40 before she took off. And then, of course, I couldn't get to sleep because I'm just laying there doing what dads do, man. I'm worried about my daughter. So I'll let you know as things develop. She can certainly now join the call, a call for the radio in the future, because with that 15 plus hours thing, while we're on the radio, it's like 9 at night until 1 in the morning out there in Singapore right now. So no excuses. I don't want to hear any excuses about homework or I don't want to get out of bed. She will not have even gone to bed. So hopefully we'll have our on the ground Singapore correspondent there. We have our one for Ukraine and Slovakia right now. We'll see if we can't get her back on board as well. That's Polina. Now, as far as the weather goes today, it's supposed to be slick drive this morning, high of 30 degrees, but it just keeps climbing until we get to Thursday at 47. Folks, that is a more than 50% increase in the temperature. We get some snow at 45 in the mountains on Friday, and then it hovers into the lower to high 40s coming out at next Monday. And of course, as you know, there's just simply no way the weather people have really any clue what's going on past really this moment in time, but certainly more than 3 days out. Now, if we're going to compare this to yesterday's weather, it is eerily consistent. I mean, to the digit. it is eerily consistent. And so I'm going to have to take a look at that. Oh, you know what it is? Yeah, 32 degrees today. Hey, Blake, you out there? Hey, you printed off the same weather for me from yesterday. Same one. And that's okay. We'll figure out the new one. Now it'll give us a chance to go back through and try to figure out if they've been consistent or if they've blown this thing up. But 32 degrees today was the prognostication yesterday. I'm sure it's not going to be that far off today. Some other things I wanted to update you on, and we'll talk about them throughout the show too. If you remember, the Idaho mass murderer got arrested in Pennsylvania. He is supposed to make his first appearance in court today. Now, I presume they have a procedure in Pennsylvania, much like Colorado, where you can request something called expanded media coverage or words to that effect that allow cameras in there so you can monitor exactly what's going on. Well, this guy faces his first day in court, and he's assigned the public defender. And for folks to just keep track of how all this stuff happens, you have rights to attorneys under the Constitution under two separate amendments. One is the 5th, one is the 6th. And if you already know the answer to this, please, I'm not trying to be pedantic or patronizing to you. I just want to explain this. Under the 5th Amendment to the Constitution, you have a right to an attorney anytime the man subjects you to two things have to exist at the same time: custody and interrogation. Custodial interrogation. If you're not in custody and they're talking to you, no right to an attorney. If you're in custody but they're not asking you questions, no right to an attorney. But if they're going to subject you to custodial interrogation, you have the right to an attorney, and one can be appointed for you if you can't afford it. That is independent of whether or not there's ever a charge filed against you or you're ever drug into court for any reason. Sixth Amendment is different. Sixth Amendment says whether or not you have been subjected to custodial interrogation, the minute you get sucked into the courtroom on a criminal case by the man, you are also entitled to an attorney. And if you can't afford one, one will be provided to you. Attorneys are provided at no cost to just about everybody in America when they're in custody at the time they're brought to court. So in Pennsylvania, this dude could be a trillionaire. It doesn't matter. If he's in custody, and he's likely to be held without bond in Pennsylvania, he's likely to, in my opinion, likely to be held without bond in Idaho. So he'll always be in custody, and he'll be eligible for the public defender's services. And so in Pennsylvania, the public defender was appointed to represent him because he is going to court. He is in custody, and he is going to be answering, for the first time, he's going to hear the charges against him in Idaho, and they're going to initiate that process that is also enshrined in the Constitution about extradition. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. It sounds like, based on what I have read, that this guy, according to his public defender, and I want to find this quote. It says, Monroe County Chief Public Defender Jason Labar, makes sense they put the chief on it. He said the accused mass murderer, quote, intends to waive his extradition hearing to expedite his transport to Idaho. He is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible. Okay, I get it, man. There's value to that tactically. One, the longer you fight this, if at all, and drag it out, the more guilty you look. If you fought tooth and nail not to get out there, it looks guilty. It may be a delaying tactic that some would engage in if they thought they were facing a certain death penalty. But in this particular case, this dude, based on the description, I don't know, man. Maybe he's just cocky enough that he thinks that he has created a crime where there's enough reasonable doubt to be argued there, where not only is the death penalty not likely to happen, but he's not likely to be convicted. But this sends a message to people in Idaho. When they hear dude's anxious to return to Idaho to be exonerated, that is a good tactical message to send out to try to get the potential jury pool, to think, that's interesting, because a guilty person wouldn't want to come to the place that wants to put him to death potentially for these crimes. So that's going to happen today. I hope we get to see some video of that. I don't know that we'll get to hear this guy say anything other than yes or no to a series of questions that the judge asks him directly, if he's allowed to at all. But DNA seems to be the linchpin of what happened here, and this is in this report. It says he was arrested Friday in Pennsylvania's Pocono Mountains after police used DNA technology, at least in part, and I'm going to gamble that it was that familial DNA had a role in that. Don't know if that's true. Just think it's probably familial DNA that ended up hooking this guy up. So anxious to hear how this case resolves. And remember, the key to getting this dude back to Idaho, or at least one of the great benefits, is once he appears in court in Idaho to answer these charges, according to the district attorney from Moscow, who looks a lot like Santa met Duck Dynasty, but he seems really smart to me and seems like he really understands the system and did a great job of communicating at the press conference. This guy tells us that once this guy comes to court, that affidavit can then be released to the public, and so we'll get to know, hopefully, a lot more. Now, remember, the affidavit in the Club Q shootings down in Colorado Springs that was released earlier, that one was about 5 pages. That's not necessarily unusual, but it didn't contain everything that you'd want to know. It didn't scratch all the itches that we have. And most affidavits don't do that, but it did provide us with a little more meat on the bone in terms of trying to understand this and gives us more of a chance to analyze this. Now, I'm no expert in Idaho law. I have been out to that great state 3 times over the past 10 years, 15 years to train their prosecutors at their various conferences and different things. But my sense of their system, especially because they're a Western state, is that it's very similar to ours. And so we'll be able to go through as this case develops and sort of unpack what's going on in the courtroom, analyze some of the strategy that's going on. In fact, if I can get someone from the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association to hook me up with a smart person out there, they may be able to comment out here on the case that's out there without running afoul of something called Rules of Professional Conduct 3.6 and 3.8. Oh, look at this. And I swear to you, I just saw this. There is an article that says, Idaho murders, suspect was identified through DNA using genealogy databases. I promise you that story, which was released last night at 4 p.m., that was after our morning show where we had the discussion here. And my thanks to big former police officer Paul for reminding me that is such a valuable tool. It turns out it looks like local police and FBI said that was what they used. This is just fascinating. If you're not a crime junkie, that's okay. This is a very unique case with a very unique alleged murderer. We're going to keep talking about it and unpacking it as it goes. Now, listen, we're going to cut away for a break here. Billy back tomorrow, by the way. And then when we come back, I want to talk to you about what took place in the NFL last night. I do not know if you watched Monday Night Football. You're a fan one way or the other. First off, great game, at least on paper, leading up to, and a consequential game leading up to last night. Do yourself a favor before we come back from this break. Google Monday Night Football and Damar Hamlin, and take a look at the hit that's on there because we're going to talk about it. That hit resulted in something that is unprecedented, at least in my lifetime, for Monday Night Football, maybe even for professional football. I've never seen anything quite like it. And then we'll talk about the NFL in general and all that other stuff. But I want to have that conversation with you later in the show. I want to talk to you about McCarthy and his bid to become the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's a career historic thing to reach for. Is he going to get there? And we'll talk about the ramifications of the path he's chosen, as well as what might happen if he doesn't get it. The best ways to stay in touch with us are a couple things. One, YouTube. If this is your first day back to work, and I'm looking at you right through the YouTube right now, first, subscribe. If you're just watching it, subscribe. Like it. But do something else. There's a little button down there. It looks like kind of an arrow thing that says share. Share this thing to your social media and say, hey, worth the watch. If you want to see some freak show doing the radio, this guy is it. Shoot it out there to your friends, and let's continue to try to grow this thing. The bigger and better it gets, the nicer the hats and clothes I get to wear. That's according to Mark Crowley, the IT guy. The other thing is you can text us. I've already gotten, maybe half a dozen, which is crazy for the first part of the segment of the show here, texts. And you can text us at 710knus.com and the app at 710knus app, which is on your phone. Easy to use. By the way, the signal much clearer than if you listen to it over the air. And then the bestest way to have a conversation about any of these topics, and it doesn't have to be something controversial. It doesn't have to be something where you take a bold position to defend something. It could just be, hey, I want to talk to you about my thoughts on this or my experiences with this. You pick up the phone and you dial some pretty easy to remember digits. 303, that's the classic for the Denver metro area. I grew up with that as the area code before they blew up all these other ones, the 720s and the 719s and the 970s and all that stuff. 303-696, easy. It's the same shape, just upside down in the middle, 696, and then 1971, my weight. No, I'm kidding. That's not my weight, but close. 1971, 303-696-1971, and give us a call about these topics as well. Listen, we're going to cut away for a break. When we come back, it's you, me, these topics about the NFL. We'll get to McCarthy and some other issues as we move forward through the show. It's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Boy, one of the one-hit wonders out there. I can't remember the artist, but Leah. Man, that one is just catchy, in part because the lyrics are so simple. Speaking of simple, George Brauchler back with you here on The George Show. Couple things. We'll take care of some business here. Turns out Blake printed off the exact right sheet, but the guy behind the microphone, that could be me, was the one who compared it to the day before and ended up reading the day before. Interestingly, as we go through the weather and stuff, and it is almost virtually identical, other than that yesterday they predicted today would be 32 degrees, is that Alexa texted in that it's supposed to be 20 degrees today or tomorrow. Now, I'm not sure if she's got better information or that's just her way of poking fun at the meteorologists by saying, I can predict the weather too, and let's find out. Maybe it will be 20 degrees. I don't know. Now, listen, something happened yesterday on Monday Night Football that was unprecedented. I want to tell you that I saw it live. I didn't. I had intended to watch the Buffalo Bills versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, remember the Bengals, Joe Burrow's the quarterback. They were the AFC champions last year, played an incredible game in the Super Bowl, just not incredible enough to pull it off at the end, although they were in it till the end. And they're in the playoff hunt. Of course, the Bills are vying. They'd love to be the number one seed in the AFC. They've got Josh Allen, who, of course, the Broncos could have had, but instead we went with Bradley Chubb, who now plays for a different team that isn't us. This was billed as a huge game, no pun intended, billed. And it was a huge game. And I had intended to watch this thing, but I was working. I was doing some stuff on some motions that had to be filed and all this other stuff. And I looked up and I was like, oh, dang, I've missed part of the game. So I go to watch it and I try to do the old NFL Network thing. And it's like, it won't let me into the game. It just keeps saying it's scheduled to be played, preview. And I'm like, what the heck? So I go onto my phone and I do a little searching and it turns out it's postponed. And I thought, that's weird. Weather? I mean, weird in January in Cincinnati that there would be any sort of weather issue like snow. And I look at the pictures, there's no snow. So finally I start looking around and I see what now everybody knows. And that is there was a devastating moment in the first quarter. It was 7-3. The Bengals had scored a touchdown on their first drive. I think the Bills had answered. Bengals were driving again. And there was a nothing of a play. And I say a nothing of a play because I've watched this hit, if you have to, 20 times. And it was a nothing of a play where Damar Hamlin, who is a defensive back, comes in. He's a 24-year-old guy, 24. He's like 6'2", I think he's 6'2", 200-plus pounds. Healthy guy. No signs of anything. And this tackle, if you see it, and I'm going to do my best to describe it, if you haven't Googled this thing, do it so that you understand what's happening here. And he tackles him from the side. The receiver, whose name escapes me, he's got his shoulder pad into his chest, which seems like nothing, like the side tackle, big deal, happens all the time. There really wasn't much helmet-to-helmet contact. Hamlin wraps him up, pulls him into him, wraps his arms around, his shoulders and his helmet to take him down. By the way, love to see somebody wrapping up for a tackle. If you're an NFL fan, what you know is over the past 10 years, there's been maybe 20, there's been a movement away from wrap-up tackling, which we were all taught in high school, and it's just turned into smash them to the ground. Like, don't throw your arms. Well, he didn't. He threw his arms around him. They go to the ground. He pops up, like right away, appears to adjust his helmet, and then the creepiest, weirdest, most traumatic thing happens. He just does the Nestea plunge, man. He just falls backward, unprotected fall onto the ground. Kabam. Just goes onto the ground. And that's it. And he is motionless. And the whole world kind of freezes in place. All the players start reacting to this thing. And they know instantly it's traumatic. The only thing I can reference that looked remotely similar, and by the way, not nearly as bad, is do you remember when Lawrence Taylor snapped Joe Theismann's leg? A career-ending injury just above the ankle. In fact, you can see that play in great detail at the beginning of the movie The Blind Side. I think it was another one that Sandra Bullock won some Oscar for or something, but they go through that play. Even then, Lawrence Taylor pops up. He's hitting his helmet. He's screaming for help. He knows right away Joe Theismann broken, right? But even the reaction of the players there was so much more muted than what we saw last night on Monday Night Football. And if you take some time to go look at this, and again, this isn't a sports show, but this really isn't about sports necessarily. I mean, I want to have a conversation with you about the NFL, but it's something I've just never seen before. And so these grown men, some of whom are weeping on the field, they create this little U, kind of a horseshoe maybe shaped wall while folks rush out onto the field to try to administer some kind of first aid. They try to load him onto a cart to take him away, and then they take him off the cart again. They have to perform CPR on him on the field. You've never seen that. You just have never, ever seen that. Then they load him into the ambulance and they take him away, and the game is suspended for over an hour. Again, something you never see. Guys get hurt all the time, even career-ending injuries, and the game goes on. I mean, we've seen dudes become paralyzed. Like 2017, there was a Philadelphia Eagles guy who hit some weird way and paralyzed him. Game still keeps going on, man. They take that guy off. They put him in the meat wagon. They take him to the hospital. Game still goes. Not this game. You have the two coaches, the imagery of these two coaches in the tunnels there under the stadium, talking, I presume, to the NFL commissioner or someone from the commissioner's office. And they're handing the phone back and forth to each other. They shake each other's hand. There are dudes taking their pads off. I'm like, oh my God, they're not going to play football anymore. I mean, it's over. Diggs apparently is reported as being in a towel already and shaking hands and hugging on other players. And it's like, what is going on here? Whatever it was that they saw out of this Damar Hamlin kid on the field really affected all these people. This was super serious. And so as it turns out, this guy suffered a significant cardiac issue. Now, I want to play for you some of the sound that was out there. What I'd like to do is to play for you the play-by-play leading up to the actual collapsing of Damar Hamlin. I can't find it anywhere, and I'd have to go back through the DVR, I imagine, and we recorded Monday Night Football so we can watch it, of course, at our own leisure, and pull that sound off there. I just don't have it today, and Blake couldn't find it either. I was looking, he was looking, couldn't find it online, but Blake did find some other good sound, and I want to play some of that for you. And then there's a bunch of texts coming in right now, and some of them about folks that they know that were at this game. We'll read those as well, but this is a news report from CBS.
Buffalo Bills defender Damar Hamlin collided with a Cincinnati Bengals player during Monday Night Football. He got up, but then collapsed moments later. The 24-year-old safety was given CPR, then taken away in an ambulance to a local hospital. Players on both teams huddled up to pray, many looking upset, shaken, and concerned for their teammate and friend.
Yeah, that's the report, but here's some of the fans' reaction last night.
Everything got dead silent. Even the Bengals fans, you don't want to see anything like that. Certainly praying for Hamlin's family.
I saw it was bad. The whole team was on the field. I ain't never seen nothing like that. Like a lot of people in there, but we all realized that we ain't never seen nothing like that in our life. It was about 45-minute wait, and it's just I knew it was going downhill. And I'm glad the game got called.
Hamlin was immediately helped after he went down, and his heartbeat was restored.
It went from wondering what was going on to wondering about head injury.
ESPN play-by-play announcer Joe Buck.
They have been administering CPR through these past two breaks that we've taken.
Hamlin is now in the hospital, sedated and in critical condition. Christopher Cruz, CBS News.
And then we have, I think, one other wrap-up story for this.
Brian Kohberger faces 4 counts of first-degree burglary for the deaths of 4.
Oh, this is? Oh, buddy, I thought we had the 3 clips in a row on the NFL thing. Sorry, man. Let me take a look here. I see it now. Is that from yesterday? Oh, okay. So anyway, that's the NFL thing. I want to read you some of the texts that have come in here. Someone has, and I was going to save this for you, but someone texted, and I appreciate this, an article that links to the diagnosis of this guy. And they said he suffered cardiac arrest. He had, in essence, like a heart attack on the field. Now, this is one of those things, man, where there's more stories that are going to come out of this. Now, his heartbeat had to be restored on the field. That tells me something, man. When someone's heart stops and it doesn't start on its own, and the thing that you worry about is when the blood stops pumping, oxygen stops getting to the brain. One of the reports I heard last night as I was following this was that he was not breathing on his own. Now, I'm no doctor. I play one on the radio, but I'm not a doctor. And that feels to me like a potential brain injury of sorts. Like when your lungs stop being able to function, but your heart's still going, that happens involuntarily. The lungs part, I just don't know enough to, and maybe someone out there's a medical smarty, maybe Steve out there knows the answer to this. But I think the big issue right now is guy remains in critical condition. 24-year-old guy who suffers a heart attack, presumably, and I'm saying presumably because it could be something else, and we'll talk about what that could be in a moment, because there is someone who has died on the football field before, and that was some time ago. There may be some other reasons for it, but 24-year-old guy suffers a heart attack. It's got to be something either undiagnosed or he took a blow in a weird way. And if you've ever worn football pads or seen them, they tend to extend down to about the bottom of the breastbone, about the bottom of that solar plexus area there where your sternum is, to protect that area from exactly this kind of thing. I don't know what happened, but that could have very well been it. Thank you, Texter, for telling me that Leah is Donnie Iris. That is correct. I failed to remember that. And then some other stuff. Here it is. This is our buddy Joan. It says that she had a friend and her husband were at the game last night. She said it was so strange, complete silence, and then an entire stadium praying, a complete God moment. She said the call of stopping the game was the right call. No one wanted to try and watch after the hit. And that's what tells you it was so serious. The other thing is there's a story out there that the NFL had said, hey, or maybe it was the ref said, hey, you guys have 5 minutes to resume play. And both of the coaches were like, screw you. We are not resuming play. And the players were like, yep, we're not resuming play. Man, I respect that, and I really appreciate that you just don't move on when this guy gets whisked away. In fact, had they not had that response to it, this would just become a story in the background. I just don't know how these guys compete after they watch one of their, I don't know, teammates, family members, if you will, go down on the ground and have to have his pulse restarted. And then here's the text that I think leads to the conversation that I want to have with you. And that is, this is from a listener. I used to be a football fan, SEC especially. Had to stop. It's gotten too violent. Is that where we are with the NFL? I can tell you I was talking with Graham last night, and his great concern is the chances now of convincing mom to let him play football have just dropped from 0 to -1 billion. And for mom, it was always about the potential head injuries, even though there's hundreds of thousands of kids that have played and play football, millions probably. And the vast, vast majority of them, 99.9% of them, show no signs of having suffered any sort of head injury or life-altering injury. Now, we know kids that are Graham's age that have suffered broken bones and stuff like that, but, you know, kids are pretty resilient and they get healed up and then they keep on playing. One of the buddies of Graham's on the baseball team is on this best football team in their class in the state. They travel around and do these national tournaments. I think they were in the national or regional championship or something just last month. I didn't hear how it turned out, but these guys are playing full contact, full pads. But does this change things for the NFL? I mean, I want to have this conversation. This listener has hit upon what the issue is. Is football too violent now? Is the NFL too violent? Is that good? Is that bad? Does it make you want to watch more or less? There's a bunch of texts coming in here. I promise I'll get to them as well as your calls. I want to have this conversation with you. Did you see this thing, and what was your reaction to it? When you watched it, what did you think? 303-696-1971. One of the most bizarre things I've ever seen on television with football, either at the collegiate or NFL level. George Brauchler on The George Show. You're listening to 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
You can't always get what you want, but if you listen to 710 KNUS, you can get exactly what you need. And what you need is to have a conversation about this NFL thing, this unique, one-of-a-kind event. We'll talk in the 7 o'clock hour a little bit more about this and the history of it, and we'll get into the Kevin McCarthy stuff that's brewing in D.C. But I want to get to the phone lines right now. Joe, you're on 710. What do you think about all this? Did you watch this thing happen?
No, I didn't. And the game wasn't played, correct?
Say that again? No, they suspended the game, and so it ended with, in the first quarter with the score 7-3 Bengals over the Bills.
Okay. This pretty much exemplifies what we become as a society. We're basically, personality, emotion over principles. They cart these players off this field, all day long with injuries, and then something different out of the ordinary happens, and it becomes very disruptive. I was just, let the game continue, let the game begin. I'm wondering how much revenue was lost, with this occurring.
Is that a concern that you have, the revenue stuff? I mean, it feels like that at some point the initial reaction of the refs was, and I don't think I'm guessing they didn't appreciate how critical this injury was, hey, get the game going back again. But then the NFL, I presume, because they're the only ones that can do it, said, we agree, we're not playing the game anymore. So is the revenue piece the part that bugs you? I mean, for me,
it's not the revenue. That's just a point that I'm making. The issue that I'm trying to establish is the fact that, if it was made out of big deal, more of a big deal than it was. Now they have a GoFundMe account. I just don't see the difference between what occurred and a typical injury, being so disruptive.
Do you think they should have kept the game going, behavior. Joe? Do you think they should have kept the game going? Cart this dude off and then just start up with the plan again?
Exactly. I mean, granted, his situation was much different than anybody else's, but the game should have continued.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And why do you say that? Well, I'll tell you the why not from my standpoint. My standpoint is...
This is a behavioral thing. You're a lawyer and you study behavior.
What does that mean it's a behavioral thing? What do you mean by that when you say it?
It's an emotional thing. Something out of the ordinary happens, and it's incredibly disruptive. Versus just a player getting injured, maybe an ankle or a knee or whatever, and being carted off the field.
But is it your sense, Joe, that the NFL should have come in and said, yes, this is a tragedy, we're going to pay it its appropriate respect, but you guys need to get back to business?
Right.
Really, Joe? And I say that because my gut reaction is, unlike any other injury where you see the dude gives a thumbs up or he's crying when they cart him off the field, these guys, his fellow players, and they're not people that just met him for the first time on the field. These guys have been together. He was, I think, a second-year player. He was drafted in 2021. He had taken over the starting job when the guy that he backed up had suffered, interestingly, a neck injury earlier in the season. But these guys are intimately involved with each other in a pretty high-risk job, and when one of them goes down, not with a routine injury, but something that appears to have potentially cost him his life or his health, it's hard to imagine turning, other than in a situation like war where you're trained for this, it is hard to imagine turning to everyone else and saying, well, forget about it and get back to playing your high level of football. Wouldn't that be tough?
Yeah, I guess it would. You raise an interesting point in that respect. I don't know.
Joe, did you watch it happen, either live or in replay here on the internet?
No, I didn't.
But you got to go back and take a look at it. Are you a football fan at all?
A little bit.
Go back and take a look at it, because you've seen bigger hits any Sunday you watch football and both dudes pop back up, or a guy gets the wind knocked out of him, or he limps off the field. I've never seen anything like this, man. When Damar Hamlin pops up after what looks to be just a regular tackle, adjusts his face mask, and then it just takes that backward fall, that Nestea plunge into the ground, it was like, what just happened? I mean, if you'd have shot the guy from across the field, it would look exactly the same way. It was amazing. And to find out more about what happened, what the long-term ramifications are for his health. The other thing that was just devastating to hear is his mom is at the game. I mean, how many
Oh,
times
wow.
do your parents show up at these games? They put mom in the ambulance with him to go to the hospital. Now, look, had this been any other kind of injury, pretty sure mom doesn't get in the ambulance with her 24-year-old son who has, an ACL injury or a broken femur or something like that. But for this, when they put mom in the ambulance, oh my God, buddy, it's hard to imagine being a parent sitting there looking at the kid that you're so super proud of, you're there to support, watching him play a meaningful game. Nobody goes to a game like that and thinks, maybe this will be the last time I ever get to see my son move. I mean, it's an incredibly traumatic and tragic thing. Devastating. But go take a look at that, would you? Because I think it's interesting to me because I can't explain what happened, and hopefully we'll know more in the future. Again, is this a one-off? And there's a bunch of texts coming in, and we'll get through some of those too. But Joe, I really appreciate you pulling the wrapper off of this segment. I want you guys to call in and react to this as well. Not just what you saw, but what Joe said. Joe's not alone. Here's one. Someone texted in, game should have continued. Do you believe that? And then someone else, Joe, it's a football game, not the Battle of the Bulge. I mean, there's a breakdown in this thing, too. There's definitely a disparity in the reactions to all this. Is this a big nothing burger? Is this a one-off? I've seen that as well. We'll get to those texts, and you too. Give us a call, and let's have this conversation. What did you see? What have you heard? How do you react to this? What does this say about the NFL or us? George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Oh, sweet goodness. I am not worthy of this bump music right here. This is the big fella. Miss him a ton. I know you must also. Guy revolutionized talk radio. I'm pretty sure I don't get to sit here without Rush Limbaugh. Hey, George Brauchler back with you on The George Show. Hour 2 of 4, 710 KNUS. We were talking in the first hour about Damar Hamlin suffering this freakish, unpredictable injury on the field in the middle of the first quarter of the Monday Night Football game between the Bills and the Bengals, played right there in Cincinnati. Damar's mom in attendance. She rode in the hospital with him. If you have not yet Googled the hit, this isn't like rubbernecking a dumpster fire. This isn't one of those perverse things where things go viral because it's just so tortured and awful. You need to Google it to watch it because it is just a big nothing burger. I mean, you see this hit, and it looks just completely routine, like nothing. I don't know. It wasn't helmet to helmet. It wasn't flying at the speed of light into another person, going a different direction. It wasn't like that. Dude wrapped up T. Higgins, great receiver for the Bengals, took him to the ground at the side and popped back up, adjusted his face mask, and then just went kabam. Just fell right to the ground and never got back up. And he's now in critical condition, I think, at the University of Cincinnati Hospital there, getting world-class treatment. They got his heart started again. His heart stopped. He suffered from cardiac arrest. Now, we had a conversation with Joe and some others. There have been a billion texts coming in here, and I want to keep it going, but I want you to pick up the phone and call me. A buddy of mine texts me and says, hey, man, how long do you think it'll be before somebody starts calling in or texting in saying this has to do with the COVID-19 vaccine? Ha ha. It happened right now. I'm looking at one. And again, listeners have thoughts and questions, and I want to entertain them right here. May or may not be conspiracy alert, but there seems to be an uptick of young athletes and regular people suddenly dying of heart attacks. Vaccine side effect? Question mark. Myocarditis? Question mark. Jaguar former player just died, age 38, apparent heart attack. And then here's one on, I don't know what this is, comatio. I don't know what any of that means right there, but it's probably Latin. And then the other issue that came up when Joe called was Joe was like, look, this is a business. This thing should have kept on going. I would have thought that was an outlier opinion. But we've had some other texts from people coming in saying game should have kept on going. They should have kept playing the NFL game despite the fact that everybody on the field that saw this guy reacted in a way that told you this wasn't a routine injury. Dude wasn't going to give you the thumbs up when they put him on the cart and took him off the field. This was bring an ambulance onto the field, which you never see. Load the guy on, take him off, perform CPR on him, which I presume means they cut his pads off of his body. Restore his heartbeat, load him into the ambulance, and then speed off to an emergency room. And these guys were supposed to keep playing. Someone texted in here, he's not breathing on his own. I'm not a doctor, folks, but that tells me that there could be some sort of brain injury here. Like when your brain loses the ability to tell your lungs to breathe and your diaphragm to move up and down. And that feels like that should be involuntary, but your brain plays a role there, unlike your heart, which can keep beating even outside your body for a time, right? So they can restore the heartbeat. But it doesn't sound like he can breathe on his own. That is tough. It says, if the player had a heart attack in the locker room or at home, should we talk about how violent the game is? Or should we allow medical testing to see if there's a congenital problem? FB is, I imagine that's football, is less violent than previous generations. Check rule changes in injury stats. It could be. That might be true. I think it's an interesting question. But honestly, if the heart attack happened in the locker room or at home, I think we're unlikely to associate it with the actual game itself. We would need to hear that somehow it was related and maybe it was a delayed onset of an injury. Someone else also used paddles on him on the field. Oh, Jesus, that's tough, man. That's starting the heart back up right there. But listen, listener, the difference is when it happens on the field in a game, especially in that dramatic way, clearly it's different, right? Like if it's in the locker room, then they're not playing probably, or the game's going on. I just don't see that having the same impact. When it happens in front of the planet Earth and certainly all those players, and they get to see all the life-saving efforts that are going into this, I just think it changes things. But if it's potentially related to that hit, and I think right now that's the only conclusion I can come up with, then doesn't it have to be a conversation about, was this just a freak hit? And it that happens. I mean, dudes get paralyzed. Doesn't happen all the time, but they get paralyzed. There's head injuries. We know that the CTE injuries that folks suffer from the chronic hitting of helmet to helmet and the different, we know that has a longer term effect. We know that it's affected people like Junior Seau, for instance, who committed suicide in part over this. Here's one. My gut feeling is those who are saying the game should go on have never had to personally deal with death that close. In a former life as an EMT, I've dealt with death, and it has a profound impact, especially in a scenario like a football game where you're not supposed to see CPR being done after a routine play. I think that's true too. I mean, now listen, one of the things that and we'll get to the phone callers here, and I'll get you to some history right now. But give us a call and give me your reaction to this. And what are your thoughts about this? Is this, tragic, but it's a one-off, George, just not a big deal? Or is this something else? Do you think it's the COVID thing? That's one of the listeners right there. Jeannie, you're on 710 KNUS. What do you think about this?
I just want to say I think it's a sad day for humanity when you hear people saying that the game should have continued. I mean, this guy could die.
He could not only die, I think, and I said this out loud last night, I said, here's my great fear. They got his heart started back up, but not before there was significant brain injury. And it's some anoxia or something, I don't know the right Latin word for it, but that his brain was deprived of enough oxygen that it can no longer function in a way that sustains life. Like he may be on a respirator now because his brain isn't working. I don't know. I just don't know enough about what's happened. But my great fear is at some point we're going to hear he's not coming back. And they're going to end up making a decision about unplugging him. What a catastrophe, right? For that family, my God, his mom was in the stands and watched it. I mean, I just can't imagine the trauma.
I mean, I hope that maybe people are just thinking he didn't actually see the play. Maybe they're just talking without the knowledge. But, I mean, it is disgusting that people think that it should have continued. Is
this a kind of thing, though, where some injury short of this, Gina, and I presume you've watched football games before. I mean, sometimes there are serious injuries. Nothing that rises to the level of thinking, oh, this person's going to die. But do you think that ought to be the approach with lesser injuries? Or is this does this stand out in your mind as a one-off? As like nothing's ever been like this and what they did was appropriate?
I think it's a one-off and it was totally appropriate for them to stop the game.
For the guys that got paralyzed, and there was one as recently as 2017, I cannot remember the Philadelphia Eagles player, should they have stopped the game for something like that? And again, you know what? You probably wouldn't know right at the moment, right? Like if a guy is hit bad, but he's able to breathe and he's able to talk, you may not know the extent of his injuries, and so then the response is different. But it just felt like all of the people on the field that could see this, Bengals and Bills, saw something they'd never seen before, and it freaked them out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how people could expect those teams to continue to play after seeing something like that.
Now, one of the texters here has, this is the Latin term, I don't know, but COMMOTIO, commotio cordis, CORDIS. I said I didn't know what that means. The listener texts back in, blunt trauma to the chest, which causes a cardiac arrhythmia, results in no pulse. The only way to get him back is to shock the heart. Now, holy crap, because they didn't, as best I can tell, he laid on the field there for a while. If you look at the timeline, they didn't get his heart started right away. They didn't start performing CPR right away. I don't know what that means. And this listener, obviously a smart medical person, says most likely in a medically induced coma, permissive hypothermia to keep his brain cool, trying to limit brain swelling. My God, that is just incredible. Does this, because it's a one-off, Gina, do you think in some way this should change the game? Or do we look at this as, yep, this is one of those freak things. It was right to stop the game, but I'm not looking for any rule changes here. I'm not looking for the NFL to do anything differently. We're not going to go to two below. You know what I mean? We're not going to go to flag.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see any changes being made. I mean, this was a total one-off. It was a total freak accident. You know, I watched it, the play. It didn't seem out of the norm.
No, not at all.
I mean, I wonder if there was maybe some underlying undiagnosed cardiac issue that maybe he had and then getting hit.
Well, this then becomes the question that another listener had raised, and that was, listen, I don't want to go off the deep end. I want to go all conspiracy theory here, but could this be related to the vaccine? Because they're...
Oh, you know what? I thought the same thing.
You thought the same thing. Okay, now I wonder how big this is. How many folks out there at 710 thought, is this related to the myocarditis that we heard about with young people, especially young men who have received the vaccine? I don't know. That never crossed my mind. It doesn't mean it couldn't be it, but I didn't think like that. But, I mean, do you think that's it?
Not that I don't know if I think that, but it did cross my mind. I mean, I'm vaccinated, but I feel like I was completely bamboozled. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but that did cross my mind.
Just for what it's worth, Gina, and I'm vaccinated a bunch of times, but, you know, when you put on the uniform, you get told to do certain things, and you do them, especially when you're in a leadership role. But how many times have you had the shot, the jab?
I just did the two.
The two, okay. I think I've got 4 of these things in my body now, and it certainly hasn't made me any more attractive or thinner. I was really counting on that from both of those. It didn't happen. Gina, thanks for the call, and thanks for the reminder that what matters here is the humanity piece. I really appreciate that. If you are of a different mind, give us a call and tell me 2 things. 1, did you or do you think this could be related to the COVID-19 vaccine as opposed to some freakish hit where there was this blow to the chest, this blunt trauma to the chest that caused the cardiac arrhythmia? And 2, did you think the game should go on? There have been texters here that have texted in and said game should have kept going on and asking provocative questions, which are interesting, which is, hey, man, what happens if this guy instead is taken off the field from an injury and then dies afterwards? Should they have stopped the game? I think that's an interesting question. A lot of folks, though, have come in and said, well, someone wrote, QAnon believes everything is a conspiracy. In boxing, I've seen knockouts occur with a blow to the heart. Yeah, that's real. That could really happen. We have men who think they are women beating I'm going to use the word tar out of women who are women in mixed martial arts. I thought we got past the brutality aspect. I think that's a comment on the question about, has the NFL become too violent? And we had a listener text in and say, listen, I don't even watch anymore. I used to be a big fan, especially the SEC. Can't watch anymore. Too violent. And I think if you watch old school football, like the Detroit Lions in the Dick Butkus era, those guys were, man, those dudes were real men, and they were real tough, and they wore much smaller pads and all this other stuff and played through. I mean, you could imagine a femur sticking out of Dick Butkus's thigh pad, and he's still playing. I mean, that's who these guys were. But this is a different universe. The men that take the field now in the NFL are bigger, they are faster, and those 2 things, if you know anything about physics and energy, add up to much more punch power and crunch power. And so helmets have had to get better, pads have had to get better, but these dudes are Mack trucks moving at the speed of a race car as they collide into another body. It is amazing there aren't more injuries. But has that left you with the impression that the NFL is too violent? Certainly more violent. But does that get you to watch? I mean, I love the competition. I love the sports. I want to support the Broncos and all that other stuff. But it is definitely a different game than it was even when John Elway first started here. Here's when the players and the coaches decided not to play. I think that's right. I think what we're going to hear is in the after action of this, and maybe the NFL try to bury this, and I sure hope they don't. I think the officials on the field and probably the NFL's gut reaction was keep it going. And then once it became evident that the players and coaches were like, screw you, you can try to play without us because we're not taking the field again, and they got to know more about the injuries, I think they were like, you know what, you're right. I think this is awful. Here's one. I can't believe the rudeness and self-centeredness of people, both to promote their vaccine conspiracies and even worse, their desire for entertainment and distraction instead of caring for another living, breathing human. People can really suck, and the texts you shared have really shown this. One of our listeners from Texas, thanks. Stopping the game was the only choice. Remember Darryl Stingley, paralyzed hit, but they kept playing. Yep, I just asked that about Gina. That's a great question. When do you stop the game? When do you say enough is enough? This injury was too traumatic. Now, listen, you may not know this, but there is a player who has died on the field, and you got to go back to October the 24th, 1971, Tiger Stadium. It was the Bears, I believe, and the Detroit Lions. And the Lions were moving down the field to try to come back from a 28-23 deficit. They're at the Bears' 37-yard line. You know the disparity means you can't go for a field goal, got to go for a touchdown. There is a receiver, a guy named Chuck Hughes. Not a big star. He'd played some seasons with the Eagles. He joined the Lions the year before. He'd had about 15 passes that season up to that point for 262 yards. He is in a play where he's not even the guy that receives the ball and get tackled. He is a decoy. He's running a route. Play stops. He starts jogging back to the huddle, and he collapses to the ground holding his chest at about the 20-yard line. This is based off an article I found. Dick Butkus is there. He sees it. He yells for medical assistance. Doctors come out. Here's what happened. Dude had undiagnosed advanced arteriosclerosis. I sound like my kids sounding out a word. Arteriosclerosis. And it was undiagnosed. And the official cause of death ended up being coronary thrombosis, which was a heart attack that stopped blood flowing to the heart. That's amazing. That is the only on-field death in the NFL. Now, I don't think we can classify what happened last night with Damar Hamlin as an on-field death, even if he ultimately dies from the injuries. But it does highlight how unique what happened yesterday was. Now, the other thing, I think the other question is, and I didn't get to this point, did they stop the game? I didn't see that in the article here referenced at all. Did they stop the game in 1971 in October? I was just a wee lad at the time. After this guy died on the field? Boy, that'd be worth checking out, because if they didn't stop it then, and that dude dropped dead on the field, was that the wrong answer back then? Is it a different answer today? That's amazing. I got to find that out. Let me see. An autopsy would show he suffered from advanced arteriosclerosis. I don't know if the game kept going or not. Folks, if you know the answer, of course, our listeners are the best and the most educated out there. They're the ones that get to the bottom of all these things. I presume it's going to be Alexa that rushes to get this information. There's a ton of texts coming in, and I want to get to all those. I also want to have the conversation with you at 303-696-1971. Unprecedented event last night on Monday Night Football. Millions of fans watching Damar Hamlin's mother in the stands in Cincinnati, watching her son making a routine play, stand up, adjust his face mask, and then collapse to the ground, and apparently suffering a significant cardiac injury. And according to one of the listeners, who sounds like they know what they're talking about, suffered some sort of blunt force trauma to the heart. It stopped the heart, and the only way to get it going was shocking it. Did they get to it in time to keep his brain from being deprived of the kind of oxygen it needs to be able to sustain life? They're talking about a medically induced coma here, this listener. It sounds super smart. The two big questions are, one, should they have kept playing? Should they have kept playing the game? And if so, what does that say about us? And two, when you heard this, was your reaction, hey, young man, heart issue, myocarditis perhaps? Is this related to the COVID-19 vaccine? Let's have that conversation. 303-696-1971. It's George Brauchler on The George Show. You're listening to 710 KNUS.
look for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
A little bit of the wagon right here, REO Speedwagon. George Brauchler back with you here on 710 KNUS, talking about this unique, traumatic event that took place in front of millions on TV last night on the Monday night football game between the Bengals and the Bills, with Damar Hamlin being carted off the field after CPR had to be performed on him. Not sure yet the extent of the injuries. He, of course, is in critical condition still. Folks texting in with stuff that they've figured out, read on the internet. Guy's apparently not breathing on his own. There's been some suggestion that, he may be in some medically induced coma to keep his brain from swelling while they try to deal with the aftermath of this injury. None of that bodes well, man. I mean, it feels like if your heart stops and then they can put the paddles on you right away, things are great. But if they took some time in getting this done, and I don't know, I'm not suggesting anybody did something wrong. I'm just saying, if that's the case, if that's what happened, man, there's more discussions to be had here. I had referenced the fact that there was an NFL player who had died on the field about 50-ish years ago. He was a receiver for the Detroit Lions named Chuck Hughes, and we've had two things that went on. The question was, hey, did that game continue on? So Blake did some great research, and it looks like the game was played to its conclusion. Sure enough, one of our great listeners texts in and says, regarding the Lions player who dies, this came from an older friend. There was just over a minute left, so they finished the game. The circumstances were different in that he collapsed going back to the huddle. He had run a route, but the pass went elsewhere. I don't think people knew he'd passed away on the field. They put him in an ambulance, and they played the final minute. I think his widow sued a hospital because he complained of chest pains 4 weeks earlier, and they didn't diagnose his arterial sclerosis. That is true. They did sue. I don't know what the result of that lawsuit was, but that's legit. This is another text. This is why people should know CPR. Chest compressions will provide blood to the brain while the AED is brought to the scene. This is a basic life support. This is basic life support. I get that, but how many guys go you just don't see other players tending to players. And I presume it's because instantly when someone goes to the ground, guys just know to turn to the experts on the sidelines and they sprint in and they do their voodoo. And my guess is, because of how unique this is, nobody running onto the field thought that this was as bad as it turned out to be. But I really wonder if at the end of the day we're going to look back and say, why the hell didn't you start chest compressions earlier? Why didn't you do CPR? I wonder now, too, and this is something that the texter makes me think about, I wonder now, too, if we're not going to see more players get immediately involved when players go to the ground to tend to them, because you just don't see that anymore, right? Here's one. Hank Gathers was a basketball player for Loyola Marymount. I remember this very, very well. In March of 1990, he collapsed on the court and died later that day. The game and the WCC tournament were canceled. That's from Tom. Tom, I remember that. I didn't remember that the tournament was canceled, but I do remember Hank Gathers. I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought Hank Gathers died in part from something related to cocaine use. And I can't, if that is wrong, then please forgive me. I think that's right. I'll try to look that up. I think Hank Gathers had, you know what? That could be wrong. It could just be a heart issue, and I cannot remember anymore. Let me see right here. It says, Hank Gathers died at age 23. God, so young. What did Hank get? On March 4th, Loyola Marymount sprints down the court, leaps, catches, slams, and dunk, and after jogging back to midcourt, collapses. Maybe it was heart disease. An autopsy found, this is what it is. An autopsy found Gathers died of cardiomyopathy, a heart muscle disorder. Gathers had been diagnosed with an abnormal heartbeat after collapse, so it had nothing to do with cocaine. I'm clearly thinking of some other player. Maybe I'm thinking of Len Bias. Maybe that's it. It's Len. I'm going to look up Len Bias. I'm pretty sure it's Len Bias that I'm thinking of. Here it is. University of Maryland basketball star Len Bias, who died June 19th of a cocaine-induced heart attack. I am so sorry, Hank Gathers, for associating you with Len Bias's death. That's what I was thinking of. Hank Gathers died. Again, we could find out that this was just some congenital heart defect. I don't know. Here's one. Hank Gathers was a heart issue. Len Bias was cocaine. Thank you. I just figured that out. Good luck giving chest compressions with pad on. That's true. Although those chests are not immobile. They do have some flexibility. But you're right. You got to cut those suckers off because they're pretty tight on there. Here's one. I thought about coronary artery blockage from a clot. Some think there are clot issues with the jab, but they also used to do something called a, quote, cardiac thump. If you saw a person go down, you would punch them in the chest before starting CPR. They stopped that practice in the early 80s due to timing issue. They believe to start the pumping ASAP. Pumping more important than air exchange, as your blood has a certain level of O2. You can hold your breath, but the circulation is important to remove toxic byproducts. Damage is done by pH changes. My God, this feels like a doctor here that is texting this thing in. I think the thing doctor's doing best practice is keeping him on the vent. Cool brain. I pray that he will come through. George, if they started CPR within 6 minutes, will one determining factor, it does circulate the oxygen. It would be nice the sooner they got the paddles on him, but CPR is definitely helpful. Anything over 6 minutes is when brain damage starts. Now that's interesting to me. I didn't realize that your brain could go without oxygen for 6 minutes before you started to suffer some sort of damage. Here's one. Don't NFL players have extensive medical and physical tests to ensure they do not have underlying or genetic conditions? That's a great question. I would guess that they do, right? I mean, especially when teams are investing millions of dollars into these individuals and their teams, I got to believe that's a good text that they're having all these tests done to see how they're doing. And they also want them to perform at their best. So I don't know. If it turns out to be congenital, I'll be surprised. Best guess it had something to do with what that other texter came in with as the blunt force trauma to the chest. My son plays high school lacrosse, and last season everyone was required to get new pads with an enhanced chest protector to prevent this exact thing from happening if they caught a ball to the solar plexus. Very interesting. I will tell you that our full contact kid, Grammy, also has an undershirt that he wears in baseball that has padding right over that sternum, right over that breastplate thing. And I think it's for the exact same thing. I don't know a lot of kids that wear it, but Graham does. And I'll be honest with you, after this, he's going to keep on wearing it, man. I'm pretty certain that that's going to happen. It says, this was on Twitter. Not sure if it's true. This is a tweet from Dr. Benjamin something. And he says, I recently administered Damar Hamlin's COVID booster on 12/26. And as a medical professional, I can assure the public he passed all screenings with flying colors. I'm in contact with the UCMC staff and will provide any assistance to them. Couple things. Dr. Benjamin Eidelman, if that's true, you have violated this guy's privacy rights, separate from HIPAA. No doctor can come forward without a waiver of that specific patient or their guardian and announce, I've provided this medical treatment to this person. If you are a real doctor, you're a real dumb doctor, because that is just not how it goes. You are not permitted to just announce to the planet Earth. Now, I'm not entirely sure I think it could be actually a HIPAA violation, because I presume that he reports regularly and files billing to health insurance companies. Yep, that's going to bring him under the Health Information Protection something, Portability something Act. That's a problem. I don't think the doctors get to come out and just say, hey, I administered a cure for syphilis to Joey Jojo Jr. Shabado. I can tell you that is not what led to his heart attack. You'd be like, what in the world are you talking about, doc? Here's one. Wolf Parkinson White syndrome, thinking not all cardiac issues would be detected. Yeah, see, again, now we're getting super medical here. I don't know this. Here's another text. Here's the proof. Read it for yourself about athletes dying on the field from taking the so-called vaccine shot. This is in relation to what happened last night. It's a retweet of a tweet by Peter McCullough. I don't know who that is. The recent paper from Dr. Can't pronounce the last name, and myself gets the sharp rise in athlete deaths into PubMed. Since vaccination, 1,598 athletes suffered cardiac arrest, 1,101 of which with deadly outcome. Over a prior 38 years, 1966 to 2004, 1,101 athletes under the age of 35 died. Well, that's a significant increase. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But what we don't know is the change in the number of athletes. Right? I mean, that number in and of itself, that pure number, is irrelevant. It has to be compared with the number of athletes engaged in the sport at the time. And the percentage may bear this thing out. I mean, I realize over just a few years, they're saying 1,598 versus 38 years prior, 1,101, but I'd love to see the percentage of athletes involved. And I'd also like to see, over that same period of time, before we start jumping to conclusions, the increase in cardiac issues over the same period of time in the general public, in the non-athlete public. That's how you get to the apples-to-apples comparison. This is just a snapshot of two facts, which may very well indicate something bad, but they don't have the appropriate context. Here's one. The cardiac thump quote was me, Joan from Lakewood. Thank you, JFL. I actually brought someone back using it, not a doctor, healthcare professional. Do not something as, whatever it is. I understand. But I do think that one doctor who came out and said I administered the COVID shot to Hamlin, I think he violated the law. I think there's going to be a penalty for that guy. It says they reported early on that they were performing CPR for like 9 minutes. I don't think they waited very long to start. They even had to put them back down once they picked them up to restart his heart again. Him, not them. I didn't know that they started right away from having watched the video and stuff that was available. I'm going to go back too, by the way, and look at the recorded thing that we had on the DVR on the Xfinity last night because I didn't get a chance to see it. It says, you choose the news is 36 minutes of no oxygen. I appreciate that, but it's not 36 minutes. We're trying to get it there, but it's really more like 18 minutes. I cannot imagine a physician would take to social media to make that disclosure. Seems like a troll to me. I hope that's true. Why don't any of these people cite their source when they spout crap? I don't know. It says Peter McCullough is a top cardiac doc who was banned from Twitter until recently. Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that guy right there. God, the texts just keep coming in. And folks, I'm interested in continuing to have this conversation with you, but let's do it on the phone as well. I'd love to know your reaction to this and what your thoughts are. There's clearly a number of people out there, like Gina, whose gut reaction was, I wonder if this had something to do with the jab. I wonder if this had something to do with the vaccine. Let's pretend for a moment it did. Oh my goodness. And I know what you're thinking too. Will they ever tell us the truth about it? If that's what did it, will they ever tell us the truth? And my guess is yes. If it was some pre-existing congenital defect, I hope we know about it. Again, you don't just get a report publicly about the cause of someone's death and the nitty-gritty details without some sort of a release. And I think it will be important for us to understand this. And hopefully he's able to come to and everything gets resolved and he's willing to have this conversation with America and the world and he gives a release for that information. That's our hope, right? But if not, we hope that somebody in a position to do so can let us know what happened, especially if it's going to have bigger ramifications for either the sport itself or health in general, which the COVID-19 vaccine would implicate. It's very, very interesting to me. But here's the other thing. Even if this guy turns out to have suffered an injury completely unrelated to this claimed December 26th vaccine, and it was purely related to this blunt trauma to his chest, it's not going to change anyone's opinion about whether the COVID vaccine leads to young people suffering heart issues. It's not going to change that opinion. So it's almost like any other, and I'm going to use the term conspiracy here, it's almost like any other conspiracy, in that you have to disprove it entirely or it still exists in the minds of the people who invented it. And I'm not saying that I'm not a doctor, folks. I can't tell you that it's not true. Here's one. Untrue about Wolff Parkinson White syndrome. DeMar would not be a football player if he had it. My son has the syndrome. Heart rate up to 247 beats per minute. Holy smokes. When I'm on the Peloton, I get to 185 and I start to freak out. 247 is amazing. He's got to take meds for that. It says, if it was a jab clot, they will never tell. I don't know, Joan. I don't know if they will or if we'll know or not. And frankly, if he passes on or is incapable of sustaining life on his own and thus giving consent, there will be a guardian. Let's presume it's his mom. Wouldn't mom feel morally compelled to get to the bottom of what led to her son's injury or potentially, God forbid, his death and say, I want the world to know about this? If you're a mom, wouldn't you do that? And are you going to allow the medical professionals to say, hey, we're not going to really tell you what happened or we're going to lie to you about it? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't know any mom that wouldn't go to the mat to find out every single cause. And by the way, if it resulted in the long-term disability or death of their son, any mother out there would say, who in the hell can I blame for this? Who can I go after and hold them accountable for what happened to my boy? So Joan, I don't agree. They restored his heartbeat on the field per the Independent. Yep, I heard that. The timing of it matters. It didn't turn out to be as serious as it was. Someone sent in a text here, and it says you know what? It's blocked or something. I can't even see the tweet that they were trying to send. Listen, there's so much more. The texts keep coming in, and I love this, all right? Keep this thing going, but pick up the phone and give us a call, and let's have this conversation. 303-696-1971. I'm going to cut away for a break. We'll come back, finish up this hour. We'll be halfway done with the Tuesday show already. It's George Brauchler on the George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
George Brauchler back with you on 710 KNUS. It's that time of the show. If you're like me, you've missed the conversation, and we're so thankful after the great holiday season that we've had to have a conversation again with perhaps the smartest person on the planet. I don't want to build it up too much. I want to make it seem like it's that big a deal, but it is a huge deal. Amy Duncan from Alpine Planning. Amy, how are you?
Well, George, man, I even still, after, over a decade, remembered that KNUS call-in number. I don't even have it programmed in my cell phone. And 30 days of not calling in seemed like an eternity. So Happy New Year, friend.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Happy Thanksgiving. All of those things. I've missed you. I sure hope you guys had. I hope Santa was great to you.
Indeed. And back at you. I hope it was a great season for you and your family. I caught quite a few of the morning shows, even though we weren't calling in, and it sounds like you got a little bit of a break yourself. So
I got to take a little bit of time to go do some fun stuff, but we are back in the saddle now, and I'm excited to start off 2023, and I'm hopeful that the very first news is the very best news.
Yeah, well, let's dive right in here, sir. So far, we're looking all right to start the first trading day of the 2023 calendar year. Dow's up about 30, S&P positive about 13 points, NASDAQ up 60 points. And, this is coming off 22. I do want to recap these numbers real quick because I'm sure a lot of investors were, reading the papers over the weekend. And this is the worst year, 2022 marked the worst year since 2008, the great financial crisis. The S&P finished down to the tune of 19%. The Dow was off. The Dow was the leader, down only about 9%, and the NASDAQ, though, sold off 33%. So, we're cautiously optimistic, as we say, for 2023. It really can't get a whole lot worse. Bonds, of course, were part of the problem. They got clobbered throughout the entire calendar year. But, George, on the bright side, here's a couple of things for investors to keep in mind, right? 2022, right? 373 of the S&P 500 companies raised their dividends in 2022.
That's awesome.
Got a lot of cash on the corporate balance sheet. We did see jobs recovery. We see oil prices, right? It was $5 a gallon in June, now down to the, closer to $3.10, I believe is the national average in December.
That's great.
Yep. Cost of living is still way too high, but 7.1% year over year in December is certainly better than 9.1% that it was in June. So, it's our job to give you guys the honest, objective report each morning. And I think, a little bit of a look back is justified this morning, but we're ready for 2023. Investors need to get their portfolios in shape, spot check their savings, and if anyone has some individual questions, then give us a call and we'll see what we can do to help.
Amy, is there something coming up this week? There's always like a report or an announcement or the Fed gets together. Is there something coming up this week that you have your eyes on?
This week, not as much, to be honest, George. I think investors need to find their footing. I believe we have the jobs report toward the end of the week, as we do pretty much every week. But next week, essentially, I believe it's starting like the 12th and 13th, earnings season kicks off, and that'll be led by the big financial companies. So that'll be big, beginning January 13th. And then, of course, January 31st will be the first meeting the Federal Reserve has in 2023, which is a critical one for seeing how they're digesting the inflation news and unemployment reports and see what we're going to do with interest rates.
I'd like
to. Those are the two big things I'm watching.
When we have you come back, I'd love to be able to ask you about these things that are coming up and the potential impact on the markets. One is, we're going to have the new General Assembly for Colorado sworn in next week. Today, we're going to find out about the new Congress and who the Speaker of the House is going to be. There's going to be a State of the Union address by the President, a State of the State address by the Governor. And I'd love to be able to talk with you about the impact in your mind that these things have, or maybe don't have, on the broader market in terms of its performance right after. And I didn't want to hit you with that question right now because I'm sure it would catch you like, what? That is not what I called in about. So I just want to plant that seed.
Oh, I follow the politics super closely, but sometimes there's almost too much data, and I kind of try to hit the highlights. So
I would also like to ask you, best gift you got for Christmas?
Best gift I got for okay. So, have you ever seen a marble run? I mean, not like a marble run. That sounds like, have you ever seen a pig fly? No, it's not mine, but that was a gift to me and my little one. And boy, is it cool. I don't know. I got some, work clothes and, some bubble bath, and I don't even take baths. And, mainly it was about the little one, and it was a great Christmas overall. I can't say that, I got like a new car with a big red bow on it. Nothing
God,
like
you
that.
see those on the ads all the time, right? And I keep asking myself, who are these people? Who are these people?
Yeah. December to remember, my left foot.
You know what I'm thinking? 2023, with the right advice from Alpine Planning, and we get everybody a car. It may not be a real car, but a Matchbox car or something with a ribbon on it. I'm going to shoot for the big car.
George, I just flopped on the funnest question you asked, the most fun question you asked.
No. We'll keep it going.
But I'm going to stick with the marble run. Marble runs are awesome.
We have some text coming in here, too, saying, please tell Amy and Gabe and Brian that you've been missed, and we can't wait to hear you in 2023. So that's awesome. Alpine Planning Group is a comprehensive financial planning firm committed to improving your long-term financial success. Investing, it's a matter of trust. They are, as always, prepared to earn yours. Call them today. 303-843-0918. Amy, so great to have you on again.
Thanks, George. Nice to talk to you.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Woodbury Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC and registered investment advisor. Alpine Planning Group and Woodbury Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated entities. 14 West Dry Creek Circle, Littleton, Colorado, 80120.
Now, listen, that wraps it up here for hour number 2 of 4 on The George Show. When we come back, listen, I've got other stuff we can talk about, but honestly, it's always going to be there. This NFL issue continues to drive a lot of the texts. I'd love the calls, too. 303-696-1971. George Brauchler on The George Show. It's 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
George Brauchler back with you here on 710 KNUS. Great way to end the second hour with our buddy Amy Duncan from Alpine Planning. Glad to have them back after the holiday reprieve. That tells you 2023 is underway. We are, in the third of 4 hours, we're going to be replaced by a guy named Charlie Kirk at 10, Dennis Prager at 11, Gorka at 1, and then we go live and local with Deb at 3 and Stefan at 4. Now, the one advantage that Deb and Stefan are going to have is they should know by 3 or 4 our time, which would be, of course, 5 or 6 out on the East Coast, the fate of Kevin McCarthy, at least as to the first vote for Speaker of the House. That's right. As you know, the Republicans hold after today a super narrow majority over the Democrats. So Nancy Pelosi, no longer the Speaker of the House. She's going to not take any other leadership roles, my understanding, but there now has to be a vote to see who will be Speaker. It says Republicans have a narrow majority of 222 to 212 with one vacancy. And to get to be Speaker of the House, because you need to have a majority of the votes available in the House, that means that Kevin McCarthy needs 218 votes. That means if the Democrats all support their person, and they will, I mean, the Democrats are super good about voting together as a bloc, not just nationally, but here in Colorado, that means Kevin McCarthy can lose 4. He can lose 4 votes, but at last count last night, or at least yesterday, it sounded like he was 14 or 15 potentially shy. And some of these were the hardline Republicans. Some of them are Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, Chip Roy of Texas, Paul Gosar of Arizona, Dan Bishop, North Carolina, Andy Harris of Maryland, Andrew Clyde of Georgia, and Representative-elects Andy Ogles of Tennessee and Anna Paulina Luna of Florida and Eli Crane of Arizona. Those 9 hardcore Republican conservatives have already signaled, this is as recently as yesterday, that the olive branch that was offered by Kevin McCarthy and what he did to try to win them over is to say, listen, I will do certain things to change the process here to make it more appealing to you. One of those is I'll lower the bar for votes needed to replace the Speaker. So if you end up hating me, we can lower the bar to make it easier for you to remove me as Speaker. He also said, I will restore to their committeeships Paul Gosar, who you know was removed by Pelosi, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it sounds like for Paul Gosar, at least, and these others that I just listed, these other 8 representatives, they said they've rejected the proposed rule changes as insufficient. That's interesting. Now, that's really interesting. So there's a vote coming up. He needs the 218 votes. Here's where this becomes a matter of history. No speaker has failed to secure the speakership on the first vote since 1923. And prior to that, you have to go back, I don't know, another 75 or 100 years. It was these speaker things went on apparently with more fluidity back in the 1700s and early 1800s, but this is historic. It would be, you're talking about 100 years, right? 1923 was the last time that a speaker has failed to secure the speakership on the first vote. Now, he could get it. My presumption is he will get it over time, but these hardcore conservative Republicans have also exacted some changes that are probably going to impact how McCarthy can manage the House. Now, Pelosi had a very narrow majority as well, but she did, no matter what you think about Nancy Pelosi, and I am no fan, she managed that slim House majority pretty brilliantly. She was able to keep those people in line. I don't know if it was through cajoling, threats, hugs. It doesn't matter. She was able to do it. Kevin McCarthy is in this precarious position where he's having to concede more and more to these hardcore conservatives, including lowering the bar for what it would take to call for a new vote, a motion to vacate and get rid of the Speaker. Now, you'll remember the conservatives, the super conservatives, are responsible for 2 other Republican House speakers in the last, 10-ish years to resign as well. John Boehner and Paul Ryan, both gone because he had lost the support of that coalition in the House. And so this vote today is epic. Now, I reached out to a couple Congress people, and you've heard of them on the show before. They're exactly who you think that they might be. And I've said, hey, would you come on and have this conversation with us? That doesn't shock me that they couldn't come on today in advance of it. Probably not going to commit one way or another to how this thing is going to turn out and how they're going to vote. But after the fact, we'll see if we can't get them on board. Now, the result of this is going to be to put on steroids the issue of a couple things that are really less about governance, in my opinion, than they are about getting some political revenge as part of it. There is a truth feature to this thing as well. But my sense of this is that there are about 5 Republican investigations that are going to have to happen now. Those will become the face of what the Republican Party does. Now, because it's a divided legislature and the Senate has a 51-49 split and Kamala Harris isn't needed anymore for the Democrats to be able to do virtually anything that they want to do, except the filibuster still exists, but you get my point. That leaves the House. Now, I don't expect there to be a lot of great policy change. We talked before about, is anyone ever going to do anything about immigration? And it doesn't sound like anybody wants to do anything about immigration. Are we going to do anything about the border? Doesn't sound like anybody wants to do anything about the border. They want to talk about the border, but nobody wants to do anything about the border. I don't think that's going to change. So they're investigations that the Republicans are likely to launch into Hunter Biden and his business deals and the laptop and all that stuff. My guess is we're going to go back into the rearview mirror, and I don't mean that as a pejorative. I mean that there's some positive things to this too, about the really ridiculously poor withdrawal from Afghanistan. My guess is, and I'm looking forward to this one too, an investigation into the whole Fauci COVID. I want to know this. And I feel about this the way I feel about the stolen election stuff, because there is such a significant portion of the educated voting electorate who have doubts, in fact, have even concluded certain conspiracy things about this. And we've got this Peter McCullough guy, and people have been texting in. I think the government owes it to America to investigate the hell out of it and try to get to the bottom of it, if only to say we've turned over every stone. And you know what? There were mistakes made, but it's not nearly as bad as we think. We're not out there killing a bunch of people with stuff that we made up and fake lies, and Fauci didn't have these. I mean, I want to know. And if at the end of the day, the investigation reveals that this guy was somehow conflicted because he had a financial incentive to push this vaccine or that vaccine, or his wife's involvement in the organization that she was a part of, I want to know the answer to these things. I mean, COVID was unprecedented in our country's history. The response by the government, both at the federal and state, frankly, local level, was unprecedented. Our loss of liberty was real. We're still reeling from it. Our kids are still reeling from the shutdown of schools. And this may not be the last time this happens. Every single news feed you open up has at least one story about the new strain of COVID. We've got to know the truth. So as much as I tell you, these are the things that I think are going to take place. And I'd love to hear from you. What other investigations do you want to see the Republicans get into? I want to know what other investigations you think the Republicans should get into. And then here's the one caveat. I don't think this is the path to maintaining the majority in 2024. And I don't think it's the path to help Republicans regain the majority in the Senate, or even take over the White House. When Republicans are in charge, the investigation piece is real and it can happen, but you and I both know the mainstream media will make that the focus and the face of what the Republicans in Congress do. They will not give it nearly the respect and the deference they did to the January 6th Commission. You know that already. And because of that, there has to be a particular focus on doing something else. And that is to try to get policies out there to be debated and to be voted on. Make the Democrats take a position against funding border security. Make the Democrats take a position in favor of trying to blow up the debt ceiling and to blow up the budget and to raise taxes on the middle class, which Biden has done, even though he pledged not to do that for folks under 400,000, and he's done it at least once. Force those votes and try to get something done. The immigration piece, it isn't going to be what you and I want, but is there a compromise out there that can get us what we want? Because if the answer is no, George, no compromise, it's got to be all about principle all the time. I understand that. When do we get that moment? Because we've had Republican president with Republican Congress, we couldn't get it done. We've seen divided government, can't get it done. We've seen Democrat president with Democrat Congress, they can't get it done either. So do we just continue to let the border remain lightly defended, largely porous? We keep absorbing millions of immigrants who claim to be refugees from, I don't know, a tough neighborhood or something that isn't really refugee status. Do we continue to do that, or do we finally say, let's do what we can to turn off the spigot to the tub, and then we'll mop up the water that's spilled out over the top? Because that's the approach, it seems to me, we need to take if we're going to be successful in the future, not just for America, but in convincing those people who right now aren't going to vote Republican in the future to say, you know what? Let's give these folks a shot. Meanwhile, and here's another one. Someone says, investigate the border situation. What does that mean, investigate the border situation? I mean, does investigate the border situation mean to get more facts about how many people are coming over or about why it's so porous? It seems to me it's a physical barrier and an enforcement mechanism, and those two things haven't happened. Here's one about George. Dr. McCullough would be someone to have on your show. He was shut down on Twitter, but I believe he's back up. Dr. Peter McCullough is an American cardiologist. During the COVID-19 pandemic, McCullough has promoted misinformation about COVID-19, its treatments, and mRNA vaccines. Misinformation, huh? He promotes the truth about these vaccines. Those are two inconsistent texts. I'm not really sure. Here's another texter, and you give us a call. First off, I want to know, should McCarthy be the Speaker of the House? If not McCarthy, who should it be? And what are the priorities for the Republicans in the House moving forward? Do you want to see them work on policy? Whether it's something to do with the economy, international relations, Ukraine, gas, the border? Or do you want to see the House focus on the political piece, on getting to the bottom of the Hunter Biden piece, of the Joe Biden piece, of any potential corruption? And for those that are like, well, we can chew gum and walk at the same time, yeah, you'd think that. But I think what we've seen is the mainstream media is only going to focus on one aspect of this, and we know that much of the air will get sucked out of any room by the investigation that we have. So what should the priorities be? And should McCarthy be the Speaker? Will he be the Speaker this time tomorrow? Will he get it on the first vote? 303-696-1971. Here's some more text. There are two parties, the stupid party and the destructive party. But the Democrats stick together. The Republicans are idiots. They can do so much, but they will probably screw it up. I hope not. Here's another one, Merrick Garland bias. How do you investigate Merrick Garland bias? I mean, I'm interested in there being an investigation of the Department of Justice just from the standpoint of making sure that it is exactly what we perceive it to be. I'm not looking for a full-blown, we think you've committed a crime sort of thing, but I'd love to see the Department of Justice drug in to answer more questions about their approaches to some of the decisions they've made about who to charge and who not. Now, again, they're supposed to be an independent arm, even within the executive branch. I want to honor that, but that doesn't mean they're unaccountable. It doesn't mean they don't have to answer questions. I'd love it. Same texter, all of it, just investigate all of it. Really? Is that it? Is this next 2-year period just about investigations of the Democrats? And is the answer going to be, well, that's what they did to us? So we're back to the tit for tat thing. I'm not saying roll over, play dumb, don't check it out. But I am asking the question, is this what you want to see the House do? What investigations should the House prioritize? What are the things you think America gets made better for if we get to the bottom of it? The Fauci thing may be part of that. I don't know. That may be one. But again, like the stolen election thing, I want us to do a full-fledged investigation with ultimate transparency because I want to disabuse people of their emotional positions on this. And I want to replace that emotion with facts. I want people to come away from this and either go like me and go, holy crap, I can't believe I got that vaccine. I can't believe I should have stood with the other soldiers that didn't do this, and I should have just been a colonel who says I'm not going to follow the dictates of the command. Now, that's unlikely to ever happen. But if it's because this thing is damaging people, me included, I want to know about it. But I'd also like to know if that's not true, if there was nothing nefarious about this, if this was all done on the up and up, despite the smoke that's been put out there, don't you want to know that too? Don't you want to get to the truth of this thing? It seems to me we lack the ability to move on from these issues until we get an investigation and some clarity. But what that doesn't mean is I want that to be their focus and their priority. Unfortunately, to bring it back around, because of the precarious position Kevin McCarthy finds himself in today's vote to be Speaker, and you can imagine it's a career thing for Kevin. It's a historic thing, right? Speaker of the House, there's only a handful of them. He had to make certain concessions, and you know that those concessions will in part be about the investigation. And that will end up becoming the perceived priority. Listen, we're going to come back. There's callers on the line. I'm going to get to them. Tom, everybody else at 303-696-1971. I want to have this conversation with you. Before we cut away, though, for that break, and Tom, I promise I'll get to you first out of the group when we come back. I do want to tell you about Dan Kaplis. Here's a guy that doesn't have to rely upon the vote of some other folks to be named the #1 civil law attorney in the metro area, if not the state. His career is what's put him in that position. You can ask his clients. This is a guy that has rung the bell for people that were wrongfully injured through no fault of their own, through the fault of someone else's, negligence, recklessness, in some cases, their intentional conduct. And Dan has figured out a way to try to help the little guy, to try to help the victim. The track record speaks volumes. Now, there are a lot of flashy ads on TV and on radio. There's people who advertise on billboards all over. What those people do is a different kind of representation than what Dan does. Many of them are volume law firms, and there's nothing wrong with what they do. But if what you're looking for is to be more than a case that is largely handled by support staff, paralegals, rush through the system to get you a check, there are firms that will do that. If that's your interest, you go there. But if what you're interested in is much more of, it's like a boutique firm, but they have the big firm strength, reputation, and resources, that's Dan Kaplis and Babar Wahid. Those two folks and their team will put together the best case you can possibly make for why you should be compensated by the stingy insurance companies at a level that tries to take some of the sting out of your injuries and your pain. Two places to go: 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or go to dankaplislaw.com. That's Dan, C-A-P-L-I-S, Kaplis, dankaplislaw.com. When we come back, Tom, Brian, everybody else on hold, I'll get to you. It's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Can't do better than AC/DC, the most iconic opening 15 to 30 seconds of every single song. They just continue to hit the ball out of the park. My kids love them too. That is one score for Dad in helping them learn about real rock and roll music. AC/DC right there. Now listen, we've covered two topics today. The one involving Damar Hamlin, who remains in critical condition at the University of Cincinnati after having suffered cardiac arrest that required his heart to be restarted and CPR performed on the field. That's driven a lot of the conversation. We also have started the shift into the big vote today out there in Washington, D.C. as to who will be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives for the most powerful country on the planet Earth. It's a big job. It's a big deal. And no speaker has failed to secure that position on the first vote for 100 years. Not since 1923. That, too, was a Republican, by the way. But right now, it looks like maybe even as a protest for the initial vote, the House super conservatives are looking to throw a vote against, if not just not for, Speaker McCarthy, who needs 218 votes out of that entire body. And the Republicans enjoy only a 222 to 210 margin. I'm sorry, to 212 margin with one vacancy. That's interesting as well. As how is it going to affect governing? I don't know how this guy governs. The House of Representatives, Republicans, they're cats anyway, right? Like you can't herd the cats. The Democrats have figured out a way to have crazy people in their caucus and still get them to all vote together. That's just not how Republicans are built. We're not the go-along to get-along party. We're the party where we value individuality, we value the unique, we value personal liberty, and frankly, we're the party of iron sharpens iron, and that's why our primaries are bloodier. That's why governing is so much harder, in my opinion, for the modern-day Republican Party. It'd just be interesting to see what happens. Should Kevin McCarthy be that speaker? Let's get to the phone lines, too, and check in on whatever folks are thinking about, especially with this Damar Hamlin thing. Tom, you're on 710. What do you think, Tom?
Well, my deal, George, is I also had sudden cardiac death. I was coaching a basketball game at Kent High School.
Wow.
At that time, JV coach for Matchbuff High School. And my heart stopped, and two miracles happened, George. The first miracle was there was a gentleman there who was from Washington, D.C. and worked in the cardiac cath lab at Bethesda Hospital. He was there early to watch his son play. He came out of the stands. He kept my heart beating. He did CPR, kept my heart beating. And then they asked me, well, do you have a defibrillator? And the trainer Perlman at Kent said, we do, but we gave it to the girls. And they're on the road. And one of my parents, the second miracle happened, George, where I happened to be walking by the trainer's office and saw, no, there it is. They forgot it. So, George, they were able to shock me back to life.
How quickly after your heart stopped did they get your heart back going? Whether it was through CPR or something else?
Well, the gentleman came right out of the stands, and he probably 2 or 3 minutes. I was talking to my wonderful wife this morning of 50 years, and she was telling me, she happened to be there, that I didn't stop breathing, I guess, but my heart did stop. And they were able to get my heart restarted with the defibrillator, but he kept oxygen to my brain by doing CPR. And the doctors, when I ended up at Swedish Hospital, told me I think you get about 8 minutes before you have brain damage, and I don't believe I suffered any brain damage. And it was a very tough thing I have 3 children, and it's tough for my wife to watch it.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what this young man's going through and his family. And, the same thing happened to Kelly McGregor from the Rockies.
I remember that, yeah.
He was in the hotel room, though, in Utah, I believe, at the time. And unfortunately, there was nobody there to help him, and he did pass away from the same thing. But
when you look at this,
do
you think that that's what's going on here potentially with Hamlin?
No, I think the blunt force trauma may have caused the sudden cardiac death or the heart to stop. In my case, there wasn't anything. And they don't know what happened, why it happened, or any of that stuff. The doctors were never able to tell me. And the other part of that was that it was 3 degrees below zero at the time. And there's 3 gyms at Kent High School, and they went to the wrong one.
Oh,
and,
my good Lord.
So it took a while for them to get there. So, I'm the most a blessed man in the world through the grace of God. I'm still alive. I've reached my 75th birthday now. And so, I have that experience. I don't have any PSD from that or anything like that. I just have nothing but thanks that God left me on this earth. I guess he has something for me to do.
Tom, that's an incredible story. First off, the only indication that your brain may have been deprived of any oxygen at all is that you listen to this show. But thank you for doing that. The other thing, and that's tongue-in-cheek, there's another story out there, and it's an incredible story about Dan Caplis. I don't know if you've ever heard this one, but Dan was out golfing, and I can't remember if there was a dude in his group or that was the group right before or right behind them. Guy, same thing. Just drops onto the course. Do you remember this? Had some kind of a cardiac arrest issue. Dan sprints over to his car where he has some kind of defibrillator there, one of these portable ones, rushes back, saves this dude's life. I mean, do you remember that?
Yes, I know Dan Caplis, and I've talked to him about this before. I ran a Little League program called the Eagles for 45 years, and his son and Dan coached in that league. So I know Dan, and I remember that specific incident.
Wait, now someone texted in and said, I thought it was a pickup basketball game. I thought it was golf, but man, maybe you remember better.
I don't remember. I just remember that happened, and he did save his life.
Whether it's Dan or the gentleman that you've talked about there and the folks that helped out, it's one of those moments where I think everybody goes through life until something like that. And in the back of your mind, you kind of wonder, like, why am I here, right? Like, what's my purpose? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if people ask themselves that about their life.
Survivor's guilt.
Well, but then you get to a moment where you do something like that, whether it's Caplis or the gentleman, and you're like, was this it? I mean, is this it? I mean, if I go now, I've saved a human life. I mean, that's a huge deal, man. I mean, I think I look at people, this is way off topic, but I look at John and Maria Castillo, who have to ask themselves why God gave them Kendrick to only rip him away from them, 18 years later. They must ask those questions. Yeah. But if you're Kendrick Castillo, this was it, man. I mean, this was always going to happen, and this was your role in this moment. And if you're the parent of every other one of those 27 people that are in there, teachers included, you look at this and say, thank you, Jesus, for Kendrick Castillo. And I wonder if that isn't something that takes place in events like this. This is a little far afield from the DeMar thing, but it's just interesting to me hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, I'll end by just one thing, George.
Yeah.
Excuse me. A lot of good came to this. I joined a group that was very instrumental in getting defibrillators in all the high schools and junior high schools and all the 5 surrounding counties. Through the fire department at Parker, we were able to get the Good Samaritan law changed. We were able to get defibrillators in every school. And we've saved 2 or 3 other lives by having defibrillators in schools. So some good has come forward. That's really the reason I called. It's not about me. It's just about, the fact that we were helping many, many other kids. So I'm just thankful for that.
Tom, great story, and I'm glad we had a vehicle for you to tell that here on 710. Thank you, my man, and congratulations. 75 is a big one. Keep it going. You can keep calling us until you get to 120, 130 something. We're going to get right back to the phone lines. Tom's line is open at 303-696-1971. Hey, before I bring up Brian, let me say this. I've had some people text in and say that there was a liner or something that said that Deb Flora was going to be filling in for me tomorrow, 6 to 10 a.m. I don't think so. I think that must have been played prematurely. That must be for a different day, because I am out a day in the future, but it ain't tomorrow. I'll be back in the saddle with you, and Blake will be replaced by a guy named Billy Thorpe. You may have heard of him, and we'll be doing the show from 6 to 10 a.m. So thank you for the text, but I think that is just something that just got fired prematurely is my guess. Let's go to the phones again. Brian, you're on 710 KNUS. Brian, what do you think?
Hey, George, I got kind of a part of your conversation. Did you tell me this guy got a booster on December 26th?
So somebody said, thank you for asking. Somebody sent in, one of our listeners sent in a text with a screenshot of a tweet that ostensibly is from some doctor. And it makes me question whether they're a real doctor, because no doctor would tweet out to social media, I performed this medical procedure on someone. I mean, that's such a clear violation of privacy laws in general, but HIPAA specifically. There's just no one who is competent at their job would do something like that in the medical field. Having said that, that tweet ostensibly from that doctor says, I gave a COVID shot or whatever, booster, to Hamlin on December the 26th, and I can assure you that it had nothing to do with his situation. Now, that could all just be misinformation. That could be a fake tweet. It could be someone trying to stir the pot, but that was out there. What do you think?
Well, we know they're mandated, right, for this booster, if you're going to be, especially in New York, and we know they're mandated for this shot, and you do have heart attacks going way up. So, at this point, I wouldn't chance it. I never have anyhow. I didn't. Have you ever noticed it's the only vaccine in the world where there's no side effects? Like even the pneumonia shot they come out, they give you side effects. Every shot in the world, every vaccine, they say, okay, this could be your side effects. But the COVID, the one thing, if you ever watch their commercials, just never a side effect. But all these people dying. So at this point, I think if you were uninformed enough to go ahead and get the first jab, I mean, I think you got kind of snookered, and that's on them. But if you do it again and you keep getting the booster, at some point, these people that are getting the boosters, it's on you. It's on you at that point, because what do they say? Get me once, blank you. Get me twice, blank.
Yeah,
so
but
at some point,
Brian, and your phone's breaking up, Brian.
But
your phone's breaking up a bit. I don't know if you can grab hold of a wire or an antenna and get a better signal. But let me ask you about this. Sometimes it's not at the discretion of the person in this way. For instance, the military says you're going to get these shots. In fact, it's the source of a great number of administrative actions that are probably on hold at the moment that were generated by soldiers who said respectfully, I don't want to take the shot for all these reasons, some of them religious, some of them medical, all that other stuff. But for the NFL, don't you remember, wasn't there something where the NFL came out and said, hey, if you're going to play ball for us, you're going to get this shot, and then Aaron Rodgers came out and poo-pooed it, and I don't know the status of it, but the gist of the question is this. If your employer says, hey, because of the nature of the business that we're in, we're going to mandate that you get this COVID shot or you can't return to work and we can't have you on the payroll. That's a little bit different than someone just standing up and saying, I think I'll go get another shot. Do you think they ought to quit their job for that?
Well, a lot of nurses lost their job, if you remember correct. A lot of nurses, and these are nurses. You got politicians telling nurses what to do with their bodies. These are nurses. These are supposedly the heroes. Remember that, where everybody's tapping pans, calling nurses heroes. But then when nurses said, hey, man, I don't know about this shot. It's experimental, And they're like, nope, you're going to get it or you're fired. And I guess here in Colorado, they kind of put them back because they ran low. So they kind of said, okay, well, we're going to drop the mandate, going to do it and get them back to work here. But yeah, there comes a point where, your life is not worth your job. I understand people had to make tough decisions, but that's where government overreach, we should have all stuck together, stood together, and said, no way. Why am I signing a release form for something I'm mandated for? You're telling me I can't sue you, but you're going to mandate me to take something? Right there, there's so many red flags that people should have just said, whoa, step back just a second here. That's called common sense, and that's what we're lacking here in America.
Brian, I don't think the federal government mandated it, and I'm certain that the state government didn't.
They did it through workplaces.
Well, federal employers get to dictate the conditions that their employees work in. That part's true. But I don't remember them reaching out and saying, Brian, you have to go get the shot. I don't even remember the state of Colorado saying, Brian, you have to go get the shot. It was a matter of individual.
If you were a nurse, you had to. If you worked for the airlines, you had to.
That's a little bit different, too, because those are employer-mandated things. I presume based on their FAA, the regulations or whatever, in order to get the planes back up and running, I imagine the federal government said, here's what you need to do. But let me ask you this. If it turns out, and I doubt it will, but if it turns out Damar Hamlin's collapse on the field was related to him getting this booster, whenever he got it, or the COVID, I don't even know if he got the COVID booster, would you say then, more evidence that this was horrible, we should have never done it?
I don't think they're going to allow it to come out to
No,
begin
but
with.
If it did, would you say, hey, this reinforces my position?
Well, of course I would. If it did get him, then it would reinforce.
And Brian,
my
I know you
position,
know where
right?
I'm going with this, but what if it comes out and it says, no, he got all the boosters on the planet Earth available to him, and that had nothing to do with his cardiac issue? Would you then say, maybe I got to rethink my position? Or would you say that's not evidence of anything?
Well, it wouldn't be evidence of anything, and I don't think. If you're in the NFL, don't you have to go through a vigorous?
I presume. Alexa asked the
health
same
screen,
question.
yeah.
I presume they do.
So
There's no
know,
way
hey,
you
his
hire
heart is
someone for
good.
jillions of dollars and then say, let's cross our fingers on your health. I just don't see that.
Exactly, and it just turns out that, especially out of New York, you couldn't even play in the stadium. I know there was one guy that was a basketball player or something that he just couldn't play in the stadium in New York, but he could still play everywhere else. So when you're out of New York, you basically had to take it. So and shame on the people that made this guy take it. It's one thing if he volunteered to take it, and this ought to be a lesson to all of us that. If somebody's telling you, hey, you got to take this, but you also have to sign a release form, and there's no side effects. But every other drug on earth has side effects. There's so many warning flags. This is where it comes in critical thinking.
I don't remember, and I've had to get the shot, both the double up front and the booster afterwards. I don't recall ever getting it and hearing there will be no side effects. I am a dude that routinely asks, what should I expect after this? And I've never heard them say nothing. In fact, if you'll remember the first 2 shots, there were a lot of people that were like, man, I was knocked out the next day. I was wrecked for 2 days. And then I got back. I mean, I heard a bunch of people say that. And I even joked on air about the fact that, listen, my understanding is your reaction to the drug is inversely proportional to how good looking you are. If you're very good looking, then you suffer, right? That was my sense. I didn't suffer at all.
But that was people. But, George, that was people saying that. You tell me any commercial. I challenge you to look up one commercial and they've had several of them, where they gave any side effects on one single commercial. They never have, but on every other vaccine, George, there is not one other vaccine where they didn't. And then you got them suppressing people on Facebook. Now it's taken over by Elon, so we'll see what happens. You had them suppressing people that claimed they were hurt. They were not allowed to even say that. And then you had doctors that if they went against it, they were threatened with their license. I mean, there was just so many red flags of why you shouldn't take it. And then they were even bribing you. They were saying, hey, we'll give you $100 if you take this.
I didn't get $100.
And then after... Yeah, at all the grocery stores, they were saying, "Hey, if you take
I've never
we'll give
heard
you
that. Where's my $100?
Yeah, ask. Yeah, you could get $100 if you worked at Safeway or King's. They would give you $100 to
employees
take it.
from their employer, not just like a you and I kind of thing.
Yeah, it was employees, and then after all of this stuff, after all the mandating and stuff, they said, remember at first it was like, you're not going to catch it, you're not going to spread it, period. And then it went to, oh, well, I guess there's just little breakouts here and there, no big deal. And then it went to, well, guys, sorry, everybody's still going to get it. So this thing, they have changed the goalpost so much. If you still believe in this, I can understand if people took it at the first, if they panicked and they took it. But if you're still out getting boosters and you're recommending that to your family, you might as well take a revolver, throw a bullet in it, twist the chamber, pull the trigger. That's what you're doing with your family. That's
Brian,
exactly
I appreciate the call, my man. We got to cut away for a break.
Right.
I appreciate I don't think that at all. That sounds super extreme to me. I don't feel that way. There are some that do. My guess is at the end of the day, we're going to hear that this guy suffered some sort of blunt trauma-related cardiac arrest. Best guess, if that's true. The folks out there who still decry the COVID-19 vaccine as being some sort of vehicle for the government to do this, that, or the other, and it's always harmful, or it's like putting a bullet in a gun, they're going to say 2 things. 1, irrelevant, doesn't matter. Or 2, they're going to say, they're never going to tell us the truth anyway. It likely was that, but they'll never tell us the truth. And that way, the conspiracy lives on, if that's in fact what it is. Listen, I'm going to cut away for a break here. I'm going to come back and get Frank and Elaine and everybody else. Brian's line is open at 303-696-1971. But what I don't want to do is cut away before I tell you about the art of granite, because here in 2023, there is an opportunity for you to upgrade the interior of your home at a time when you look around and think, maybe this isn't the right market for me. Maybe I'm not going to be able to get around and buy or sell the house that I want in the way that I want. And so you're going to look at, how do I make the interior pretty? There's a couple ways to do it. And one of the biggest is that eye-catching kitchen counter that you have, the counter in your bathrooms, your master bathroom. And Mitch Floria is the expert craftsman and businessman to be able to do this. He brings two things to the table that others just don't. One, an unmatched passion for the craftsmanship of this. This isn't just about putting some kind of a rock or man-made material in your kitchen. Dude's an artist, right? But two, he's also a businessman committed not just to growing his bottom line, but to customer service. That's how he's grown this thing ever since he started the business after illegally immigrating from communist-controlled Romania under Ceausescu. This guy has started a family, started a business, and for many, many, many years has been putting out top-shelf products. After talking to these guys for 5 minutes, you'll know they're the real deal. That's from Kell, an online review. Granite selection is absolutely gorgeous. I went to a ton of places before deciding to work with Mitch. Mention KNUS. You get the bathroom countertop for free if you do the kitchen countertop, or if you're just doing one or the other, you get the sink for free. That's a commitment to giving you the best bang for your buck. Call Mitch, 303-386-5919, 303-386-5919, or you can check them out at theartofgranite.com. That's theartofgranite.com. When we're back, it'll be Frank and then Elaine and everybody else. I promise if you call, we'll get you on. George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler right back with you here on 710 KNUS. Going to try to get to all the callers that we can. We'll start with Frank. You're on 710. Frank, what do you think?
Hey, George. Hey, I don't think this safety's heart condition had anything to do, obviously, with the vaccine. It was some sort of a trauma that happened to the heart and threw it into a spasm, just like any other muscle. Of course, your heart being a muscle that guides blood around, it tends to have a lot more significant consequences. And these things have happened way before pandemic and vaccines. I remember it's probably 20 years ago. I think they had two high school kid and a little league kid who got a line drive back to the pitcher's mound, and I think both of them died because it did the exact same thing through the heart into arrhythmia. I remember Hank Gathers. He died from an arrhythmia on the court.
He sure did.
I mean, this is not, this isn't splitting the atom. And of course, there's going to be no way that anybody would say that the vaccine caused anything, and it's going to just fuel all of the conspiratorial crazy anti-vaxxers out there, because they're going to say, oh, they won't tell you, it's all part of the conspiracy.
Well, that's my sense of it too, man. Frank, that's my sense of it too, and that is, if they come out and say it, people will be like, aha, we knew it. But if they don't say it, or they say it had nothing to do with it, they'll be like, that's exactly what you'd expect to hear.
There is no doctor. There is no doctor who would say that there's cause effect in this situation. And I just, all this stuff, there's been no spike in heart attacks or heart conditions since the vaccine's been around. That's all been debunked. If the occurrence of heart attacks has gone up at all, it's because we're dealing with a bunch of baby boomers who didn't take care of themselves in the first place and were hyper-indulgent. And that's what's happened. I mean, there's no cause effect on any of this stuff. And so just, everybody loosen the tin foil on their heads and get past this. The other thing that I really want, it just bugs me. It drives me crazy. But the other thing that I really think is important here is, if McCarthy gets to be the speaker or whatever, I think he will, like you said, probably on a second vote or something like that. Get off of this, let's investigate everything in the rearview mirror that's already happened, and start figuring out a way forward. It's like investigating gravity. We know what happened in Afghanistan, and it was because anybody with their head screwed on will tell you that once we pulled out, that's what's going to happen.
Brian, forgive me, man. We're at the end of the hour. Thanks for the phone call. I think Frank, I'm sorry, I think I said Brian. I think Frank's made some good points. I'd like to discuss them with you. Elaine, I promise, and the others, if you stay on at 303-696-1971, I will get you at the top of the hour. Our last hour of this 3rd of January is George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. Little Ozzy Osbourne right here. It is Crazy Train on 710 KNUS anytime you're listening to The George Show. I told you I was going to get right back to the phone lines, and Elaine, and by the way, Frank's line is open at 303-696-1971. Elaine has held on, and I promised her I would put her on as soon as we got back. I want to be true to my word. Elaine, you're on 710 KNUS.
Thanks, George. I want to speak to the fact that I was one of those nurses that was terminated because I didn't take the vaccine. I worked for state of Colorado at Fort Logan for 38 years.
Wow.
And I was terminated because I wouldn't take the injection.
What kind of nurse were you?
Psychiatric.
Okay, and so the Fort Logan, and how long has it been? Is Fort Logan still a mental health institute in some way? Do they still do stuff?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's where I worked, yeah.
And
it is.
Was the vaccine mandated by the state of Colorado? Was it mandated by your individual employer, supervisor? Who was it that said, you got to do this?
State of Colorado. I called Governor Polis. Of course, I didn't expect a call back, and I didn't get one. But I let him know that I had worked for the state of Colorado for 38 years. I was appalled that he was able to do that. And I also I did say that I felt like he was sinning unmercifully for taking people's incomes away because it's been really struggling for me.
Has there been any reprieve since the COVID seems to have waned quite a bit? Is there a chance that you can go back and get the job? I mean, did they terminate you for cause? I mean, how did they classify this?
Well, I had 4 correctional actions, one each week, and with the information that if I would take the vaccine, I would not be terminated. And I said, no, I'm not going to. First of all, in nursing school, I was taught you don't ever take anything that's not been approved, and this medicine has not been approved.
Well, it was on an emergency basis, right?
Well, I have a lot of friends and relatives who have repercussions from this, and people, the gentleman before said, "Oh, I don't believe it." Well, I believe it because I have friends and relatives who have died from this.
Do you think that this is at play at all in the injury to this young 24-year-old man from the Buffalo Bills, this Damar Hamlin?
You know, I was watching the game last night.
Yeah.
I don't. It looked like he got hit. I mean, clobbered, actually. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I would say probably not, but I think it would be worth exploring. I mean, I think we are being sheep led to the slaughter. I really do. It's just.
Well, who wants to slaughter us?
Oh, who?
Yeah, who wants to slaughter us?
Our own government, and I'm sorry to say that.
But you think the government is? You think that the COVID is related to a government plan to kill people?
I do think so. That's a possibility. I don't know.
What would they
but
gain from that?
Oh, they would gain all sorts of things.
By killing people? They lose a taxpayer. My guess is they're most likely. Go ahead.
The population is way too high.
Says who?
And I think I don't know. I've read it. I've heard it. I just think it's possible that's. And I'm not. Well, I guess I question things because I think that there's a lot of stuff going on in this country that are illegal and not okay, and just it bothers me.
Elaine, I can see questioning things, and I appreciate that you do that. I think that's what conservatives do probably better than anyone else on the ideological spectrum. Question, be skeptical, scrutinize. I appreciate all those things, but it is entirely different thing to go from, I think the government has incompetently rushed through a process that would have otherwise discovered some of the health risks to this thing and gone to, I do think that the government may have engaged in the intentional killing of its citizenry for some unknown reason. I mean, that's a big leap.
It's just a thought, and I don't necessarily believe that, but it's a thought because it's just, why were they so pushy with it? It was just, what
if they just thought it was the right thing to do, and they thought that people were too stupid to do it if they told them all the facts, and so they wanted to get it done? And not because they were right, they're incompetent. But I mean, I'm willing to conclude that. I mean, I don't think the government's good at pretty much anything that it does, but there's a huge difference, a big gap between that and saying, I think this is intentionally designed to kill the population. Like, dang. And if that's
Well,
the case, they suck at it. They haven't killed very many people.
I think it could be. We haven't seen anything yet, I don't think, in terms of side effects from this. I really believe that. And
What side effects are you worried about?
Oh, a lot of blood clots. I have a father. When my daughter-in-law's father was a healthy guy, it took that. He ended up with blood clots and died.
How old was he?
Probably in his early 70s.
Okay, that's in that sweet spot of risk.
My brother, who is a farmer in Minnesota, is still sick after having COVID. He still has a terrible cough and lots of test stuff. He's on medications. I have a friend here, a female friend, who just got terribly sick, and it looks like it's possibly from COVID. From the results of the medicine. I don't think you rush into a medication without having tested it somehow. I thought it was just awful.
So you don't think there was any testing of this at all?
Hardly. I mean, nothing with any results of a year down the road or a year. I just think it was really awful, and I'm very frustrated with what happened to me.
Elaine, along those lines, and I had started to talk about this in the 8 o'clock hour, there's a vote for Speaker of the House that's taking place today. It's historic in that if Kevin McCarthy doesn't get it on the first ballot, he'll be the first guy to fail to do that in 100 years. And one of the things that he has pushed for, and I don't know if how much of it is because of pressure from the conservatives that kind of hold this vote in their pocket, but one of the things is to take a look at Fauci and the whole COVID thing. Are you supportive of the House Republicans focusing their attention and time and effort on that? And if so, what other investigations do you think that the Republicans ought to be engaged in here?
Well, I haven't thought very much about what other investigations, but I do think that the Fauci thing needs to be.
And what are you
explored.
looking for with that investigation? What do you suspect may have occurred that we need to get to the bottom of?
I think pushing this in, but without having a whole lot of investigation of the medication was awful.
And should somebody be held liable for that? And what does liability look like?
Well, I think they should probably, first of all, lose their job.
Well, Fauci's out of a job. He's done.
He is. Yeah, he is done, and I'm so happy because I never ever agreed with what he was saying anyway. But I don't know. I haven't given a lot of thought to that, but I think I will. I just think it was a terrible, terrible thing to do.
I think there's potential there. I want to get to the bottom of this too, because as people talk about conflicts of interest and reasons why things were made, and again, I'm no Fauci fan. The minute he revealed he lied to us about the necessity of masks because he was trying to manipulate the population into doing one thing or another, I could never trust him again. I mean, it is one thing to say, do you look fat in these pants? No, you don't, even if that's a completely different kind of lie. This one, on a matter of epic public policy, I could never believe the guy again. So I'd love to get to the bottom of this. My concern is we're going to end up being distracted from trying to make real policy changes or at least advance legislation that we can commit the Democrats to voting against that would be useful in 2024.
Well, I appreciate that, and you are much smarter around those
I am
issues
not.
than
Not at all.
Yes, you are.
Look,
but I wanted to share my experience with the state of Colorado because they absolutely forced me out of my job.
I get it, too, because CDPHE, once they come down, once the polis arms them with an emergency order, everything they say becomes a matter of criminal law, right? It becomes a misdemeanor. Punishable by jail if you don't comply with their order. I can see that spilling over to the employment stuff. First, Elaine, thank you for doing the heavy lifting of working at Fort Logan. That's not an easy job, too. I'm sorry that you lost your job because of this. I don't think you should have. I hope you get one back and you get it back soon, and thanks for calling in. We're going to get to the phone lines again. Glenda, you're on 710 KNUS. Glenda, what do you think?
Hi, George.
Hi.
Well, I think there were some really good points made, and I don't want them to be lost because I'm just an average citizen that believes in staying healthy, and
Same.
I definitely agree with the last caller that it was rushed. So I thought, my choice is not to take. I'm not big in vaccines. I had them all, but I've also known like flu vaccines and stuff. I looked at the statistics. We promote them like crazy. They don't work. So I always
What doesn't work?
Promote like flu vaccines.
They don't work?
Really very. No. If you look at the statistics, no, they don't. If you look at the statistics, they will help you get over the flu like 4 hours earlier if you are in a certain
How
state.
can they
Like,
measure that?
George, that's the thing. It's like when they actually look at the data, we promote pharma. So this is the point I want to make. So here's the thing. I got censored early on Facebook, and I didn't say anything hateful. I was really saying there's instead of getting the vaccine, I'm choosing to do all these things to make myself healthy. I had looked at all the protocols for vitamins and things, and I got censored. And I knew right then there is something wrong with this. Then I watched all this promotion. We spent millions of taxpayer dollars telling people to get a vaccine, and I will tell you, if it will come out, because it's all there, that what Pfizer and Moderna knew about the test results, they're forcing everyone to have it.
You think that's
So
coming
that
out
will
when?
come out.
When's that coming out?
As soon as things stop getting censored. But let me make the real point I want to make, because people will debate this. But Pfizer promotes news, the mainstream news, like 75% of their money pretty much comes from Pfizer and Big Pharma. They're owned by it. They don't talk against it. It's all money. And the lobbyists, the politicians, if you look at how much money they get from pharma. So this is what we need to do. We need to make it illegal for the big pharma to do their own testing and keep their own data, because they are proven liars. If you look back, nobody has lost more lawsuits for lying to the public than big pharma. Number two.
Hold on. How do you keep a company from testing its own product? I mean, I don't think the government has that kind of authority.
You give the data to somebody. Even the CDC. Do you know the CDC and the FDA make money on vaccines? Now, that is conflict of interest. If you really dig down to it, we have such an entangled web of money that nothing is real. The CDC is not protecting us. They're not looking at the data. They're absolutely, people that work at the CDC are waiting for their big job in pharma if they do the right thing. They're making money on vaccines. How can you test a product for safety to the American people if you're getting 45% of your income from vaccines? People in Moderna.
Hold on. Who's getting 45? Who's getting 45% of their income?
Look, CDC.
The organization?
Yes.
Off of what, licensing, some sort of compliance fees? I mean, the kinds of stuff we see from every administrative agency, or something special?
They're getting it from big pharma.
I don't see how you could pass a law to prevent a company from testing its own product. I just don't see that. I could see you saying, hey, we mandate additional testing, but I don't see how you can stop a company from testing its own product.
Okay, but you know what? They need to give their data to someone else. At the same time, they're doing their own testing, fine. Yeah, they can do their own testing. But we need to have testing from people that aren't, as they call it, sock puppets. They really, if you look at it, the entanglement of money, even Moderna has a piece of the patent of the Moderna COVID vaccine. That means every scientist, including Tony Fauci, gets an incentive if we approve that drug. If you dig deep into this.
Wait a minute. How does he get an incentive as a government employee?
Because there is a law that allows those scientists, those government scientists, to get patents, to get pieces of the patents. It happened, I don't know. Yeah, it's there.
I've never heard of it.
It's all there. I'm sorry, but it is there. So I'll tell you that this is not disputable.
Why isn't it disputable?
Okay, it is disputable but because this is not the information that's being shared with the American people. But if you dig it, you will find it. And it is there, and this is not conspiracy theory. This is facts. This is conspiracy facts. We have money that is supporting these vaccines, and the CDC and the FDA are part of the money train. So, I don't know all the motives, because I think there's lots of people involved in what happened, and they all have their own motives. But I do know that we need to separate the money. It's follow the money. And until you separate the money, you are never going to convince me that, because she's right, that nurse is right. There are doctors they weren't anti-vaxxers. There are doctors all over the world, Bert Vandenbosch and other that have their whole industry, their whole life has been about vaccines. And they said, if you start vaccinating for a viral disease that's airborne, during the pandemic, you will destroy the immune system of the population, instead of letting them get the virus, get herd immunity, and then you vaccinate for it after the pandemic. So people have been predicting, very well-known people, but they're all censored. They're all taken off all of the channels so that you don't hear about them. But we're talking about people that aren't anti-vaxxers. They're all over. I could send you a list of 20 names.
Are they
for you
opposed
to check
to the
out.
vaccine?
What they have become opposed to the vaccine,
Okay.
because they were in favor of the vaccine, and then they realized, a lot of them realized, that when you try to, in the middle of a breakout, if you try to vaccinate a population in the middle of a breakout, you will absolutely create variants, and you will destroy the immune system. It's like having a linebacker, and he has one job to do on a football team. You vaccinate him, and that's the only job he can do. The virus gets very
But
smart.
Glenda, and I don't want to make the whole show about COVID. It sounds like you're saying there should be no use of vaccines at any time. Not flu, not COVID, not
That's
nothing.
not what I said, George. I'm not a vaccine lover, but surely there are some vaccines that are good.
What are the good
not
vaccines?
Okay.
What are the good ones?
Well, you know what? I'm not going to claim to have expertise I don't have. Now, the thing is, any vaccine that is done in, people say polio. Okay, polio may be a good vaccine.
Maybe.
It took them 10 years to perfect the polio vaccine to the safety that they could actually start giving it around the world. Look at the history. Not 6 months, not 3 months. Even there's films of Tony Fauci early in his career saying, you vaccinate 500 people and you see what happens. And it's been 6 months,
final question, Glenda. Let me ask you: would the proper response then to the COVID have been to do nothing?
No, George, look into this. We did not treat properly. There are incredibly great not over the counter, non-label, in other words, fantastic antiviral drugs that you would use anytime somebody walked into your office with a viral condition, any kind of flu. They would give them ivermectin. They give them hydrochloroquine. They would give them a steroid. They would give them, an antibiotic. They would give them budesonide, for breathing. Those are how doctors have treated viruses forever. For some reason, they would not. They said, you don't treat your COVID that way. You go home. They did not give them at-home treatment. The CDC, that's what their job is to do. They should be keeping people healthy. They should be saying, get these things over the counter, or go get them from your doctor.
Glenda,
go home and treat yourself and get better.
Do you think if this young man, Damar Hamlin, had been vaccinated as recently as last month or so, do you think that likely played a role in what he's experiencing right now?
Possibly. I mean, there's soccer players that, I've seen films. There's at least 20 soccer players that did exactly on the field what he did. And what they found, not only they're finding the more you get vaccinated, so the more boosters, the more danger there is. There's heart inflammation. So there's a reaction to everyone who takes the vaccine because the troponin in your heart will be elevated. And so there is some adverse, even though people with a healthy heart, they'll never know, but there is an elevation which affects the heart muscle. So we know that the vaccines aren't good for anybody's heart. But for whatever reason, these very healthy athletes are doing sudden death. And I've seen video after video after video. In Europe, they're talking about this, George.
Yeah.
It's the United
Glenda,
States we're not talking about
and
this.
forgive me, I got to cut away for a break, but I think I've given you plenty of time to have the conversation.
You did. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Glenda's line is open at 303-696-1971. Bill, Jim, the others that are calling in right now, I promise to get you in. For whatever reason, man, this topic continues to blow up the text as well. Folks who are just convinced, as some are, that the COVID was some nefarious plot by the government to get people. And I don't know. I just I get that you can think that the rollout was a mistake, that they should have just targeted those most at risk. That's what I think. I'm not a big fan of the mandate, but this idea that the government is out there doing this on purpose to just make money or get people, I mean, come on, man. We're going to do this to our military because it is an order that came down from the commander-in-chief. We're going to do this to our military so that we can make some money? Really? Man, I don't see it, but well, what do I know? I'm just me. Hey, listen, before we cut away for a break, and I promise to come back to Bill, Jim, and the rest, and I'll get to some of the text too. Remember how I told you about making the interior of your house look wonderful? There are folks out there that are so easy to get to, and in fact, the trip is probably worth the drive, right? That is it. You head out, the experience, you head out there to Urban Lights. First, urbanlightsdenver.com. That's a website. It's cool. It's awesome. They'll show you all the products, but just like any other online site, it has its limitations. You just can't get a real sense for how it looks, how it feels, how it compares to other objects in your room or in your house. Drive out to Urban Lights. It's just south of I-25. It's on Santa Fe between Mississippi and Florida, right behind that McDonald's that you drive by all the time. You go up the little stairs, you say hi to Dave and his team. They're going to greet you. They're not going to mob you or stalk you, but they will greet you and say, listen, how can we be of service to you? They'll show you the layout of the place, which is awesome. They do the lighting, the furniture, decor, ceiling fans, the whole kit and caboodle, and they break it up into these different themes, whether it's modern, it's rustic, it's French, it's whatever it is. These folks at Urban Lights know exactly how to put you in a position to make the best decisions to improve the interior of your house. And frankly, I'd never been there. And when I went out there, I thought, this is so cool. It gave me ideas for my own house. Here's the cool thing. If you go and shop with them right now, 40% off. Now, I'm not good at math, but that sounds like 2 out of 5. 40% off of MSRP on all lights and decor during their ongoing holiday sale. When you get there, do me a favor. Would you tell Dave and anyone on staff, I'm here because that crazy guy George on 710 told me to come out here. I'm so thankful I did it. And then text us and tell us how the experience was. That's urbanlightsdenver.com, urbanlightsdenver.com. We're going to cut away for a break. When we come back, it'll be Bill, Jim, some of the texts that are coming in. It's me, George Brauchler, on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Dealer's Wheel right here on 710 KNUS. Every time I hear that song, of course, I'm thinking of Quentin Tarantino's first big smash movie, Reservoir Dogs, with Tim Roth and a whole host of other people that end up showing up in his other movies moving forward. That's a great movie. Although I'll say this, there was a time when I had taken a trip for some business stuff the July before last out to Florida. I took TT with me back when he was still up for traveling, and we spent a lot of time going through the Quentin Tarantino library of movies, and there's 9 of them now. That one did not resonate with him at all. Just way too much dialogue, way too much talking. On the other hand, really liked Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, and his favorite thus far, Inglourious Bastards, which is, of course, epic. I mean, it's just a huge one. Let's get right back to the phone lines here. Bill, you're on 710 KNUS. Bill, what do you think?
Hey, George. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, my man. What are your
thoughts?
thoughts?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, that woman, I don't know her name, that was just your last caller. She's what's part of what's wrong with this country these days. First of all, the polio vaccine was not developed for 10 years. They started working on it in the late 40s. Something testable was developed in 53. Jonas Salk tested it on his own family, and then it went through tests through several 100,000, maybe over 1 million North Americans, Canadians and Americans, and it was released for use, and I know this, Tuesday, April 12th, 1955. How do I know that? I was born on Friday, April 15th, 1955, and my mother told me she was never so relieved in her life as when that vaccine became available right before I was born. So it was not in development or in testing for 10 years, as she said. And the other thing she said that was really offensive, she said the CDC makes money off this. And let me tell you something. The CDC is a government agency. Everybody that works there is a government employee. And even if they come up with some fantastic save-the-world thing, it might go into their folder and be used in their review to get a promotion or a raise, but they don't get a commission or a bonus based on sales of products, like she was implying that there's some type of evil money conspiracy here by the government to make money by government employees. It's nuts. So that's the thought process that leads to things like that, to me, is what's wrong with a lot of people today.
Bill, I do think that there are questions to be answered, and I want, and I said this at the beginning of the show, I want us to have an investigation to scratch that itch so that people can say, okay, we've got the information and now we can move on.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really actually what's going to happen for a big group of folks.
Yeah.
But the part that you bring up is, you're right. There's never been an aspect of government outside of being a whistleblower where I've seen someone be able to make a commission or money off of the performance of some federal job. Right. In fact, as you know, there is a pretty strenuous ethics regulation that governs the conduct of government officials all over the place, and you get crushed for stuff like that.
Right, and I mean, these are the same people who think cops get paid to write tickets. You know, I mean, it's nuts. I've gotten tickets and I don't like it, but I don't think the cop is getting a commission on my ticket. You know, he's a government employee. He's getting what he gets. He's doing his job.
I do think I think there was a time where there were quotas, and that was, look, your sergeant sends you out and says, hey, look, man, over the course of this shift, you need to write an average of so many tickets. Now, that's not the same thing as a commission. That's different. I can see that having existed. I don't see that anymore. I know that there are agencies that have moved to, hey, you need to have this many contacts with the public. I don't know if that's still around, but that's not the same thing as issuing tickets. I mean, but it just concerns me that with every single issue, and this started, if you remember this, Bill, this conversation started with the discussion of whether or not the COVID had an impact potentially on Hamlin on the football field and having this cardiac arrest. There are just folks out there who are going to be convinced that at every turn, this government is out to get them.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And it is, you are correct. Asking questions is a healthy thing, but that doesn't mean every question is valid or equally valid.
That part's true, too. That part's true, too.
I mean, there's some questions that's been answered. The fact that you don't like the answer doesn't mean the question has to get asked over and over again. And I think, again, she's probably one of those people that thinks that if she doesn't get the answer she wants, then it hasn't been answered.
She's also probably got information you and I don't read or don't look at, and I don't want to discount everything just because I haven't heard of it, but I just, listen, there was a caller, a nice person named Elaine who called in, who'd said, I leave open the possibility that the government did this vaccine thing on purpose knowing it would kill people because they want to kill people. And I'm like, what? You think other Americans wake up, go to school, get an education, take a job with the government, and somehow get to a place where they're like, let's go kill people? I mean, what?
I was expecting her to go with, oh, that would save Social Security, like if all these old people die or something like that. But again, it comes back to, as a government employee, I don't get an incentive for saving Social Security. That's just a problem of our society.
It's also
not of
it's counterintuitive too, because you're likely killing the people, one, that are the most ideologically aligned with the government in power, and two, they're taxpayers. Right? You're killing off taxpayers.
You just made me think of something a little off topic here. You know, they just in Arizona they had that election recount thing, and Carrie, what's her name, Lake, lost by 18,000. But the Secretary of State, I think it was, lost by less than 600 votes. And I have to wonder if 600 people that would have been supporters of him didn't die, more of him than the other person who won didn't die because of the attitude of some of these people towards COVID.
I don't know. I don't know.
Because it's a proven fact that in red states the death rates were higher among 65 and older.
Well, see, and I haven't seen that stat, but I'd be interested in knowing why that was. Is that a causation? Is it a correlation? Is it a resistance to the vaccine that led to this? I don't know. Bill, can I ask you for a favor? One, thank you for the call. I want to let you go because I want to open up the line, and I also want to get to Jim and Jason who have called in. I want to quickly tell you, though, about our buddies at Littleton Jewelry, right there just south of Hudson Gardens on the west side of Santa Fe. Listen, this is a slow week, right? We're just getting into 2023. Get in the car, drive over there, and turn right at the jewelry repair sign just south of Hudson Gardens. Go in there and this is your New Year's resolution. I am going to go visit these places and see what all the talk is about, what all the hubbubaloo. Am I saying there's too many B's in hubbubaloo? Maybe there's 4. Hubbubaloo? Something. Go in there and say hi to Jesse and his team. Long-term employees from the community. These aren't the big national chains, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they do a better job because it's more intimate, it's more meaningful, it's more personal for them. The bottom line matters, but not more than the relationship with you, and that's the big difference between them and the big stores out at the malls and other places. Get in front of Jesse. Tell him this is what I want to do in custom jewelry. Yes, of course, they'll say, do you want to buy or sell gold and silver and platinum and jewelry and watches and coins? They do all that stuff, and they fix up the jewelry and the watches. But custom jewelry is really where they have carved out a niche that's just unbeatable anywhere else. Please don't take my word for it. Not until you go out there and check it out. And then call me back or text me back and be like, I went out there. Freaking awesome, man. It is just awesome. Go check them out. Easy to find them online, littletonfinejewelry.com, littletonfinejewelry.com. But get in the car and drive over there. Tell them hi. Tell them you listen to George on 710 KNUS. Jim, you're on 710 KNUS. What do you think?
Good morning, George.
Hey, sir.
Very thought-provoking. I wanted to say a couple things that I do know a little bit on this in the medical. First of all, the Trump administration brought this vaccine out, right? This was done under them. So I think a lot of the callers that are against the vax.
In fact, not only did he bring it forward, but remember later on he bragged about how quickly they were able to mass produce it and put it out there.
Right. So I bet what percentage of the people that call are against it voted for him as well. So that's pretty interesting. I'll just say this, the fact of the matter is, the CDC did lie on a couple things, but I will say they started out, first of all, I don't know if you recall, they said, you don't need PPEs for this. If you recall, because we didn't have any.
Oh, I remember. This was the thing that cost Fauci all of his credibility with me. And then later on he goes, yeah, I lied to manipulate people into doing certain things. I'm like, well, then why would I ever believe you again, man?
Yes, exactly. When you start out with a lie, how can you believe them afterwards? So that's where I'm coming off. You should not lie like that. Second of all, I'll just say this. That's a flat-out lie when the person said that the pharma regulates or audits their own drugs. That's not true. It's through a third party. And it was the same thing for the vaccine as well. Pfizer did. Now, they did have some problems because they were underreporting some things, but it's a flat-out lie that Pfizer self-audited themselves on that. They had a third party doing that. Matter of fact, there's a lawsuit going on now about that because some of those people that were involved in that were fired. And they brought it up saying that they were trying to bring up to light some of these side effects. And they were kind of unreported, we're finding out now. Now, I'll also say this, being that I know this area, every side effect that is reported with the vaccine has a higher incidence with the virus. Every one of them.
What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
That tells you this is what it tells me. If you're at a high risk and you get this virus, you're in bad shape, and that's why you should have the vaccine. And the fact of the matter is, the government again did a bad thing here, because what did they say? Instead of hammering through the high risk concerning being overweight, immune compromised, asthma, smoker, and not even mentioning their vitamin D, they didn't do that. If we would have focused on, versus doing a blanket vaccine, focused on the people that would benefit from it, their credibility went up. And they lied again. And that's the problem with our government. It's not been truthful through this whole process. And I'll also say this, mandating it for kids is the biggest fallacy alive. Kids do not need this.
Yeah,
vaccine.
that one bugged the hell out of me too.
Yeah, and they did that. And schools still are doing it. My kids, when they went to CU, they had to get the vaccine. I'm like, what the hell? They don't need the vaccine. The fact of the matter is, and I'll just say this: I got the booster. My wife didn't. We both got the virus, and we both resolved at the same time. We know this: having the vaccine does not prevent you from getting the virus, flat out. And again, that's another lie, because the CDC was saying if you get this, you're not going to get it. That's a big lie too. They knew these things. So I'm saying you right
but
now.
I do think it's about recovery, right? It's about minimizing the impact once you get it.
Absolutely. Anytime you're exposed, it's the same thing with the cold, right? You get the cold, and if someone brings the cold back, all of a sudden you bounce back very quickly. It's the same thought process. This technology has been around for a while, so this is not totally new. It isn't in cancer. They've been using this technology for cancer. So it's not totally new. So we're not on a new frontier on this thing. I just think that if people are concerned about not taking the vaccine, look at themselves. If they're overweight, then they should lose weight. And that's the fact of the matter is, if they want to not take the vaccine, take care of yourself.
Yeah. Jim, I appreciate you getting all this information. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, too. Again, there's just folks out there like you, and thank you for the call, Jim, who have made themselves smarter on this topic than clearly I have. And some of it is trust, man. Some of it is trust. And when I've got medical professionals, doctors in my family who say, take this shot, and they give it to their own kids, they give it to their own families, and they take it themselves, and friends of mine who do the same, they're not part of some big conspiracy. They're not getting money off of me getting the shot. And they certainly wouldn't say, I'll substitute George and his kids' lives for me putting a couple extra bucks in my pocket. I mean, that is a view of humanity that just defies logic for me. There are bad people out there, but come on, man. You just simply can't explain all these doctors telling me they've done their research and they've come up with this. Now, again, it doesn't mean that the numbers that you have aren't right and all this. It's just hard to really wrap my mind around this being some giant conspiracy by the government. Towards what end? I have no damn idea, and my guess is you don't either. I don't know how this became a show about COVID again, but I think it started with the Hamlin discussion and some folks suggesting that the fact that he may have gotten this booster, according to some weird, probably fake Twitter tweet out there, that somehow this impacted his heart. And anyway, we've gone down this rabbit hole. I'm happy to continue to have the conversation with you. Jason and Tracy, hang on. We got to cut away for a break. We'll come back. I'll give you what time that I've got. It's George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
George Brauchler right back with you here. Let's do what we can to get the callers on the line here. Jason, you're on 710 KNUS. What do you think?
Hey, George. How are you today?
Good. What's going on, my man? Yeah.
I've called before. I'm in the airline industry. One of the things, that I was listening earlier, had to step away, and then came back. One of the things I was talking about earlier, that we're talking about, was who had to take the shot.
Yeah.
For the airlines, from what I understand, because we have government contracts, that's where the mandate was coming. That said we had to take it. A lot of pilots with all the airlines had said, we don't want to, and there was a lot of pushback on a couple airlines. The fly in the ointment here, though, is per FAA, and my numbers may be off a bit, but you'll get the point. Pilots aren't allowed to take any drugs that have not been on the market for, I think it's 2 years. So something has to be approved. Now, we can't just, because we have to, depending on where you are in the industry, I have to get a medical every 6 months. And because of my age, I have to get an EKG once a year. And we can't take drugs. There's certain drugs, obviously over the counter, ibuprofen, Advil, stuff like that you can take. There's other medications that you have to get an okay from your FAA doctor. And I know of no drugs that you need a prescription for that have been on the market. And like I said, I think the number is 2 years. I may be off. It may be 1 year, maybe 3 years. But the point being, the COVID shot was not out for that required time.
So what does that mean, though? Does that mean that forever, if something happens, some explosive new virus, the zombie apocalypse, something happens, the FAA cannot bend or have an emergency rule that supersedes that in order to address it?
Well, where I think this can go off to have severe consequences, what if I don't want the shot? The FAA forces me to get the shot. Then it comes out that I lose my medical because I was forced to take the shot because I fail an EKG. But I have I'm not going to beat the FAA.
No.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought this drug was brought out under emergency order or something.
Yeah, it was approved under some FDA emergency.
Okay.
Thing.
So now Big Pharma is protected. I've lost my job. I've lost my career and a way for my income. I have to do something that I was forced to do, and now I've got no recourse.
Well, what's the answer then? What's the alternative? If you have an emergent situation, and even folks disagree about how emergent it was, but let's say it's an emergency situation, the global health, whatever they are, the World Health Organization agrees, all this stuff. What's to be done?
Well, first of all, I question the decision-making that was used to implement this. One of the metrics in the airlines that is watched closely is sick calls, because that's a huge expense. I mean, fuel is the biggest expense with an airline, and then labor is second. In my opinion, where the red flag went up for me was we should have seen flight attendants, because they're the ones working in the back of the plane, bringing people in from China into America, flying out of China all over the world. Flight attendants, in my opinion, should have been getting sick and dropping like flies if this virus was that critical. Because let's face it, if it came out, when it came out February of 2020, that this existed, we know that it had been in amongst the masses for months before that. When it comes out is not when it comes out. It came out months prior. So if it had been amongst the masses for say 6 months, and I'm open to whatever.
Well, how did it spread then, man? How did it spread?
Oh no, it's spread that way. I'm saying, what was the severity that it was? If it was so bad and so dangerous, why didn't more flight attendants die?
I don't know the answer. I really don't know what the stats are for that.
And I'm telling you and I can tell you, there was no delta. There was no change in deaths and sick calls in flight attendants during the winter months. So my point being, we were told that this is bad. This is a virus that's spanning the globe. This is going to kill you if you don't get the shot. Then why didn't more people die? Why didn't flight attendants die from this if it was so bad?
I just don't know I can't answer that. I really don't know the answer.
Oh no, and I'm giving you the answer. There was no change. The answer was there was no increase in sick calls. So the question is, if it's so bad, why was there not an increase in? I'm telling you, there's no increase.
It's an interesting question. My man, look, thanks for the call and thanks for keeping us up to speed on this. Last quick question. You think it had anything to do with the injury to Hamlin last night?
I tell you, I saw the shot. the hit that he took. I don't know. I mean,
don't think it did. Someone's going to have to prove to me it did. It just, given everything that's out there, it looks like he took some sort of blunt trauma to the chest at just the perfectly, like a 1 in a million shot on his heart. And man, thank you for the phone call. I got to cut loose because that music's playing in the background. That means they're going to cut me off. And I mean, I can't keep talking past 20 seconds from right now because they'll end it. It's going to be Charlie Kirk, followed by Prager, then Gorka. I think Jimmy S. is filling in for Deborah Flora, and then Stefan at 4. I'll be back, me and Billy, tomorrow, 6 to 10. George Brauchler on The George Show, 710 KNUS.